Loana, a young princess, often found herself haunted by a recurring dream. In it, she was 18 years old, though in reality, she was only 8. The dream would begin with her approaching a dimly lit room where her mother appeared to be searching for her. She would enter cautiously, only to be met by an unsettling scene. A maid lay dead on the floor. Loana's first instinct was to tell her mother, but before she could move, she heard her mother's voice behind her. Her mother would appear, speaking in an oddly calm tone, asking if Loana desired to be loved and reminding her of past complaints. She would say that Loana had always wanted to help, and now was the time. There would be a twisted accusation, and then Loana would accidentally stab her mother. Her mother's final words haunted her. "Do you understand now?" The dream always ended with her mother's cold acceptance, and Loana would be left feeling betrayed. It was on her 18th birthday that she received her mother's gift, death. When Loana would awaken from this nightmare, she would be drenched in sweat, her screams alarming the nearby maid. The maid, though startled, would reprimand her for waking up on her own for the first time. It was then she would learn that it was Louis's birthday. Sitting up in bed, she would look around and feel a strange familiarity in her surroundings. The room seemed smaller, as if she had indeed reverted to her 8-year-old self. Yet, the dream had felt so real, as though she had been living through a prophecy. Loana, or Princess Loana Bilkiom as she was formerly known, was a child of the emperor and a concubine, born alongside her twin brother Louis. Though raised with the title of princess, her mother's disdain for her had been evident. In contrast, Louis was her mother's pride and joy. Her mother would lavish him with affection while treating Loana with cold indifference, never offering her even a fleeting smile. The maids had noticed this disparity, and it had trickled down into the way they treated Loana, showing her little respect and leaving her quarters neglected. It was on this day, 10 years ago, that a maid had accidentally ruined Louis's birthday cake. Her mother had stormed into Loana's room, eyes blazing with anger, and accused her of spoiling the cake. Loana recalled the overwhelming sense of injustice she had felt then, but now, the moment seemed eerily familiar, as though she had lived it once before in the recurring nightmare. Was it possible that this was a prophecy, and that her life was unfolding just as her dreams had predicted? Loana's sense of dread deepened when her mother locked her away, forbidding her to leave her room. Days passed, and hunger gnawed at her. She could barely recall all the dreams she had endured, but one thing was clear. There was an unsettling pattern. Could all these terrible events from her dreams be destined to happen? Why did her mother despise her so much? Was there some hidden truth behind it? Staring into the mirror, Loana would notice her own blonde hair and blue eyes. She looked nothing like her mother or father, a fact that had always puzzled everyone, including herself. Could that be why her mother treated her so harshly? Yet now was not the time to dwell on such thoughts. If her dreams indeed foretold her future, she would need to act to change her fate. Determined, Loana resolved that she must find a way out and seek help. There was only one person who might be able to aid her, and she needed to reach him before it was too late. If she was to survive and escape the fate her dreams had predicted, she could rely on no one but herself. She reflected on the fact that her father, the emperor, held absolute power, and if her mother, the empress, requested anything from him, it would certainly be granted. Yet, she knew in her heart that he would never assist her in escaping. After all, he had never bothered to visit her, even once. If she wished to survive and find a way out of the palace, she would have to take matters into her own hands and seek an audience with him personally. However, the history of the imperial family was tangled in complexity and conflict. The present emperor was not a direct heir to the throne. The royal lineage had rejected the empress's right to ascend, deeming her unfit to rule, and consequently, she had been unable to claim the throne. Eventually, she was married off to a prince from a far-off empire to solidify political alliances. In this foreign land, she gave birth to Loana, a child meant to serve as the rightful heir to the throne of the empire. Although the emperor was from a different lineage, Loana's physical features, her bright blonde hair and striking eye color, were undeniable evidence of her true claim to the royal family's bloodline. She was certain that if the Empress, her mother, saw her, there would be no question of her legitimacy. Despite the deep animosity between them, Loana believed that her mother's hatred for the Emperor might compel the Empress to protect her, if only to spite him. In a twisted turn of fate, the woman who loathed her might be the one who could ultimately save her. Loana's thoughts were interrupted as she reached the door to leave her room, only to find it tightly locked. She hesitated, feeling a sense of desperation rise within her. "What should I do now?" she thought, considering her options. It was clear that she needed to find the Empress if there was any hope of securing her future. With that thought, she decided to try drawing attention. She pounded on the door with both fists and shouted for anyone to hear, hoping to attract someone's notice. "Is anyone there?" she cried, her voice echoing down the empty corridor. "Can anyone hear me?" After a few moments, there was a faint creaking sound, and to Loana's surprise, the door slowly swung open on its own. She immediately grew suspicious. Could this be a trap set by my mother? She wondered, her instincts telling her to proceed with caution. She quickly stepped back and concealed herself behind the heavy curtains that hung near the entrance. As she peered out from her hiding place, she saw a few servants walking past, speaking in hushed tones. Their footsteps echoed down the hall as they unknowingly walked right by her. Breathing a sigh of relief, Loana noticed that the curtains she was hiding behind were thick with dust and cobwebs, clearly neglected and unclean. The thought struck her that if she emerged now, her golden hair would instantly draw attention. She needed a disguise. Without hesitation, she tore down the curtain and wrapped it around herself, covering her hair and shoulders. The coarse fabric scratched at her skin, but it was a necessary discomfort for the sake of her safety. Quietly, she slipped out of her room and ventured into the palace corridors, now shrouded in the faded fabric. The palace seemed vast and unfamiliar as Loana wandered through it. Though she had lived there for some time, this was the first occasion she had ventured outside her room unescorted. She had always been accompanied by her mother whenever she left, and now, without guidance, she felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She wound her way through the grand halls and into the gardens, the lush greenery spreading out before her like an uncharted territory. As she moved deeper into the garden, a growing sense of unease crept over her. It was as though a pair of unseen eyes were watching her every step. Am I being followed, or is it just my imagination? She thought, trying to dismiss the feeling. The soft breeze carried with it the sweet scent of flowers, their fragrance growing stronger as she moved forward. Loana recognized the familiar aroma. It reminded her of times when her mother would sit in the royal garden, surrounded by blooms. I know this scent, she thought, slowing her pace. The closer she got, the more she wondered if her mother was nearby. The idea of her being so close stirred mixed emotions within her, fear, hope, and uncertainty all at once. Just then, a voice broke through her thoughts coming from behind her. It spoke with a hint of amusement, warning her that she seemed to be headed in the wrong direction. The words made her freeze in her tracks. Her first instinct was to believe that it was her mother, somehow appearing when she least expected it. The scent of the flowers seemed to grow thicker in the air, almost overwhelming her senses, and for a moment, she feared she had walked straight into a trap. But before she could turn around, a firm hand suddenly clamped over her mouth, stifling any sound she might have made. Panic surged through her, and she struggled to break free. A boy's voice whispered into her ear, cautioning her to remain calm and still. He spoke with a quiet authority, his grip unyielding as he kept her restrained. Do not move, and do not make a sound, he instructed, his tone both reassuring and commanding. As she struggled to understand the situation, memories of her twin brother Louis surfaced. He had always been their mother's favorite, and she recalled a moment when he had admired a garden of roses. Their mother had lovingly told him, "All these roses are for you. You are the main character in this place." Loana, in contrast, had never received such affection from her mother. She had longed for love and attention, but it seemed reserved only for Louis. The boy apologized, sensing that he had frightened her. He acknowledged that the nights were bothersome and assured her he was only trying to help her escape unnoticed. Loana found herself wondering who he was. His face seemed familiar, yet she couldn't place him. He encouraged her to breathe deeply, assuring her that it would help her feel better. The boy mentioned that he had seen her before the knights did, which made Luana more curious. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had encountered him somewhere before, perhaps even in a dream. As she contemplated the possibility, she began to suspect that it could be connected to a prophecy she had once heard. When she asked about his connection to the knights, he replied that although he wasn't unfamiliar with the palace, he was there as a guest at the second prince's party, attending with his father. The boy admitted that he had been instructed to befriend the prince, though he found the task tiresome and would not have come if not for the empress's orders. He had hoped to meet the princess, but had been unable to find her. Luana, realizing that she was still wearing a cloak to avoid detection, asked why he was searching for the princess. He explained that since the empress had invited all the nobles, the princess was expected to attend. He added that when noble girls reached the age of 8, they began participating in courtly events. It was the princess's 8th birthday, and she would likely appear to receive well wishes. Luana was taken aback by this revelation. She had remembered it as the prince's birthday, not realizing it was also her own. The connection to Louis's birthday had overshadowed her awareness of her own celebration. It dawned on her that if people were there to congratulate him, then some had come for her as well. The boy noticed Luana's expression and asked if it was also her birthday. Luana's shock was apparent as she involuntarily confirmed it. The boy mentioned that he had planned to present a gift to the princess, but seeing that fate had brought it to Luana instead, decided to give it to her. He gently placed a bracelet on her wrist, explaining that although it was intended for the princess, he was content with giving it to Luana since it was her birthday as well. He expressed regret that he could not meet the princess but wished her well nonetheless. Luana accepted the bracelet, still processing everything that had happened. She thanked him, her mind racing with thoughts about the gift. Did he know more than he let on? The boy turned to leave, advising her to go inside before catching a cold. As he departed, Luana noticed a small detail. His shirt button bore a flower on a shield. She wondered which noble family he belonged to. As the boy's figure faded into the distance, Luana found herself thinking about him with a sense of admiration. It was rare to encounter someone who treated her with such kindness and understanding. She resolved that once she had secured the Empress's favor, she would seek him out. They would undoubtedly meet again. Princess 4. In a secluded corner of the palace garden, 2 men were discussing a matter of importance. One of them remarked to the other that Loudon Pilkium, the Empress's son, should attend the upcoming birthday celebration for his younger siblings. Even nobles don't disregard such events as you do, the man pointed out. But Loudon dismissed the suggestion, asserting that he was the only prince who mattered. In his view, the younger prince and princess held titles in name only, lacking true legitimacy. His disdain for them, he explained, stemmed from his deep resentment towards their mother Liliana, who had drastically changed the emperor. Loudon reflected bitterly on how the emperor had become infatuated with Liliana, abandoning the empress and the duties of the empire. Since moving into a private palace with Liliana, the emperor had grown distant and indifferent to Loudon, leaving him with a painful sense of loss. The father he once adored had been stolen from him, and that sorrow had naturally turned into hatred for Liliana and her children. The other man then mentioned that the young princess was rumored to possess blonde hair and blue eyes, traits associated with the imperial family. Loudon dismissed the notion as baseless gossip, remarking that while the emperor had pale blue eyes, his hair was a mundane brown, and Liliana herself was nothing like the royal lineage. Loudon's thoughts then turned to a long-standing issue, the law that prevented women from inheriting the throne, a policy enacted by the first emperor. He lamented how the empress, despite being more capable of leading the empire, was limited to merely overseeing state affairs because of her gender. The law had caused considerable suffering, and though Loudon felt powerless to change it now, he vowed to abolish it once he became emperor. Their conversation was interrupted when they noticed a rustling in the nearby bushes. To their astonishment, a young girl emerged. It was Luana, who appeared startled upon seeing Loudon. She had overheard palace maids describing him as cold-hearted, particularly toward anyone associated with Liliana. Even Louis, The younger prince had been subjected to public scorn by him. Now confronted by Loudon, Luana felt a surge of anxiety, fearing she would be taken back to Liliana's mansion. Loudon's eyes narrowed as he studied the disheveled girl standing before him. Recognizing her from rumors, he spoke with a sharp tone, questioning whether she was there to mock them. "Why are you here?" he demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. The girl, flustered and without her belongings, tried to compose herself. Loudon's companion observed that her appearance was unbefitting of a princess. Her clothes were in disarray, and she appeared frightened, as though someone had been pursuing her. When Luana finally managed to speak, she expressed a desperate wish to meet the Empress. Loudon, however, saw no reason for such a meeting to take place. He was adamant that she had no right to see the Empress. His companion, showing a degree of compassion, reproached Loudon for his harshness toward a mere child. "You say her mother was abusive to her," the man noted with concern. "Yet here she stands, alone and vulnerable." Before Luana could respond, her legs wobbled, and she whispered faintly about being hungry before collapsing. The other man urged that a doctor be summoned at once, but Loudon suggested taking her to Liliana's mansion instead. "She is Liliana's daughter. I owe her no favors," he said indifferently. His companion, exasperated by Loudon's stubbornness, reminded him that the girl was still his younger sister and urged him to act with some decency. As the girl lay unconscious, her frail body and worn clothes made a striking contrast to the lavish lifestyle of the younger prince, whose birthday was being celebrated. Loudon hesitated, then reluctantly scooped her up in his arms. He observed that Luana bore no resemblance to the second prince, Louis, who took after their mother, Liliana. The disparities between the siblings were apparent, and it was clear that Luana's life had not been kind. Carrying her, Loudon headed towards the palace, his thoughts clouded with conflicting emotions. Despite his resentment, he couldn't entirely ignore the reality of her situation. She was indeed his sister, and for now she needed help. A woman noticing the young girl asked who she was. The prince responded that she was Liliana's daughter, to which the woman remarked in disbelief, "She doesn't resemble Liliana at all." The prince, with a hint of irritation, replied that she was now trying to compliment the girl's appearance. The woman conceded, commenting that Luana was indeed lovely, but added that they couldn't blame a child for the past misfortunes caused by her mother. The prince, however, found it hard to suppress his disdain, feeling revolted just by having Liliana's daughter before him. At that moment Adam entered, accompanied by a doctor. The doctor immediately examined Luana, observing numerous scars on her body and diagnosing malnutrition. He prescribed an ointment for the scars, assuring that with proper nutrition, she would recover swiftly. The prince, visibly concerned, demanded to know how a child in the imperial family could have suffered such neglect. The doctor, noticing the resemblance in hair color between Luana and the prince, began to suspect a secret. His suspicions deepened as he remarked that the girl bore a striking likeness to the late crown prince. When the doctor suggested informing the empress, the prince admitted that she was unaware of Luana's existence, fearing that news of the child might reopen old wounds related to her lost daughter. Adam then inquired about Luana's development, and the doctor noted that, for a girl of 4 or 5, her condition was normal. This prompted the prince to exclaim that Luana was, in fact, 8 years old, shocking the doctor, who wondered how an 8-year-old could appear so young. The misunderstanding was quickly clarified by Adam, who explained that Luana was not the crown prince's daughter, but his sister, Liliana's child. The doctor questioned the quality of care she had received, noting her small stature and signs of neglect. The prince, frustrated, expressed disbelief, recalling the significant amounts of money sent to Liliana for the care of her children. He suspected that Liliana had used the funds for her son rather than Luana, funneling resources toward the boy's tutors and training while her daughter went without. Adam sought the prince's guidance on what to do with Luana now. He offered to take responsibility for her, and Maria, another attendant, volunteered as well, saying she would be willing to look after the girl despite Liliana's past actions against her. The prince, contemplating the situation, decided to leave the matter to the empress, though he privately considered Maria a suitable caretaker for Luana. However, the prince still harbored concerns about Liliana's household. He ordered Adam to instruct Vincent to investigate the courtesan's mansion to uncover what had transpired there. He briefly considered informing the Empress about Loana, but then dismissed the thought, fearing it might only remind her of the daughter she lost soon after birth. Adam suggested that perhaps Loana could bring some comfort to the Empress, potentially diverting her attention from other concerns. The prince, though, remained skeptical, remarking that Liliana's ambition to elevate her position by using her daughter was nothing but a foolish dream. Adam, attempting to reassure him, remarked that Loana's presence might not be a burden after all. When Loana awoke, she found herself lying in an incredibly soft bed. As she regained consciousness, a wave of confusion washed over her, and she wondered where she was. As she took in her surroundings, she realized the room was beautifully decorated, far more luxurious than she had expected. It was a relief. If her mother had captured her, she certainly wouldn't have been given such comfort. Stepping down from the bed, Loana slipped into the soft, fluffy slippers by her feet, wondering whose room this could be. It was clearly not meant for an ordinary person. As memories of the previous day flickered in her mind, she vaguely recalled glimpsing a crown before losing consciousness. Stepping out of the room, Loana was struck by the grandeur of the surroundings, which felt far too royal for the situation she thought she was in. She caught a glimpse of herself in a mirror and noticed that her clothes had been changed. Just then, a voice startled her, causing her to stumble backward. Before she could fall, she was caught by a young man who immediately instructed, "Do not frighten her, Maria." The voice belonged to the Crown Prince's maid, who quickly apologized and assured that she would look after Loana, referring to her as "Your Imperial Highness." Loana was bewildered. Was she truly being taken care of by the Crown Prince's personal maid? A sudden suspicion arose. Had the prince abducted her to keep her safe from her mother? When Loana looked up at him again, she felt her legs give way, and she collapsed once more. The prince, with a hint of concern, asked Maria what was wrong, to which Maria responded that Loana seemed too weak to stand. Desperate, Loana clutched at the prince's sleeve, pleading for him to save her. He, taken aback, sat down beside her with a calm demeanor, explaining that he had not meant to frighten her. Loana found herself wondering how the Crown Prince, who was known for his stern reputation, could now be speaking so gently. Picking her up in his arms, he suggested they get some food, asking if there was anything in particular she wished to eat. Loana hesitated, thinking about a taste she had dreamt of, something sweet. When she mentioned this, the prince asked if she would like some dessert. Although uncertain about what exactly she craved, she could only recall the sweet flavor from her dream. He reassured her that she could have whatever she wanted once she was feeling better, but suggested that they start with some soup for now. Carrying her effortlessly, the prince opened the dining room door with his foot and set her down on a chair that seemed far too large for her. When he questioned the choice of chair, Maria explained that it had been prepared according to Loana's age. The prince then asked her to arrange for a taller one next time. He lifted Loana onto his lap and began feeding her the warm soup himself. The first taste surprised her. It was rich, fresh, and more delicious than anything she had ever had before. "It's a nourishing soup," the prince remarked, "one that children don't usually enjoy, but you should eat it to regain your strength." Loana, finding the warmth of the soup comforting, shyly asked if she could have a little more. The prince was momentarily surprised by how quickly she had finished, but he assured her it was no trouble and ordered another serving. He couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness as he thought about how an ordinary dish like vegetable soup seemed like a luxury to her. He turned to Maria, suggesting that warm cocoa would make a good sweet treat for Loana, to which Maria agreed. The prince then promised Loana that she would have some cocoa the next day, even teaching her how to make a pinky promise. As he did so, Loana couldn't help but think that the prince, despite his fearsome reputation, had a surprisingly kind side. For his part, the prince found himself puzzled by the emotions stirring within him. Though he barely knew her, there was a faint yet persistent worry gnawing at him. Was it because she seemed so fragile? Or was there something else about this young girl that he found himself inexplicably drawn to? Her well-being mattered to him more than he cared to admit. The prince lifted Loana once again, but she insisted that she could walk on her own. As they continued, she quietly thought of escaping before he could take her to her mother. Her real destination was the Empress, and she suggested to the prince that if he simply told her the way, she could find the palace herself. However, the prince had already seen Luana's living conditions while she had been unconscious. It had been less a palace and more a prison, an unfit place for a member of the royal family. He dismissed her suggestion with a warning to keep quiet if she intended to call such a place a palace. He then led Luana to a well-furnished room, explaining that it would be hers from now on. A maid named Maria informed her that she had done her best to decorate the room. Luana was taken aback. She could hardly believe that such a space was meant for her. The prince introduced himself, revealing, "You must realize who I am. I am Loudon Belkium, your brother. Though our blood is only partly shared, you are still of our imperial family, and I would not be so irresponsible as to leave my little sister alone." He urged her to consider staying, and as he left the room, Luana found herself slowly adjusting to the unexpected kindness. Outside, Loudon encountered his friend Adam, who remarked that Loudon had handled things better than expected. Adam had returned out of concern, fearing complications might arise during the escort mission. Despite his own sick brother waiting for him, Adam had chosen to stay, convinced that Loudon would do well in managing the situation. He couldn't help but tease Loudon, reminding him that he wasn't the type to direct his anger at a helpless child. Weariness overtook Loudon as he sighed and asked to be left alone. Adam, however, had come bearing a gift, a bottle of elven wine, a rare treat gifted by the imperial palace in recognition of past events. As they shared the wine, thoughts of a tragedy surfaced. A ploy by Liliana had led to a disastrous event, causing Adam and Maria to lose their father. It had also robbed Loudon of his mentor. While they drank, Adam reiterated that Luana was now considered Loudon's sister, even if she was also the daughter of their enemy. "Do not let foolish thoughts cloud your mind," he advised. Loudon, determined, whispered that he would indeed avenge his teacher someday. Meanwhile, Luana awoke, feeling anxious about having overslept, and found Maria standing by her side. The maid presented her with a cup of cocoa, explaining that the crown prince had promised it to her the day before and had even arrived early to see to it personally. Maria remarked on how unusual it was to see him act in such a considerate manner. Luana couldn't help but ponder the prince's contradictions. He loathed everything associated with her mother, yet his demeanor toward her was kind. The name Liliana haunted her thoughts, like a shadow she could not escape. When Maria saw that Luana had finished the drink, she promptly refilled her cup. Luana was struck by the unexpected warmth she had encountered in the palace, and she began to wonder what would happen if she lost it. She expressed her gratitude to Maria and promised to repay her kindness one day. Over time, the two had grown comfortable with each other. Luana then asked if Maria had indeed prepared the entire room herself. With a modest smile, Maria confirmed that she had. As they spoke, Maria revealed more about her past, mentioning how she had grown up with the crown prince. Despite his blunt nature, there had been nothing charming about him in her eyes. Yet she found it difficult to reconcile his rough manner with his affectionate treatment of Luana. A slight unease crept over Luana's face as she sensed someone behind her. It was Loudon, who had overheard the maid's remarks. "So, that's your true opinion of me, my personal maid?" he commented dryly, causing Maria to turn pale with surprise. Though the room fell silent, the bond between the siblings and the surrounding court was growing stronger. The prince inquired of Maria whether that was truly her opinion of him. Instead of showing fear, Maria responded firmly, remarking how many times she had asked him not to surprise her in such a way. The prince, taken aback by her boldness, commented on her daring attitude. At that moment, Adam entered the room and affirmed Maria's stance. The prince then shifted his attention to Adam, asking why he had come. Adam explained that he had brought a gift, mentioning that it was in celebration of the princess's recent birthday, though it had passed just yesterday. He offered a rabbit teddy bear to the young princess, expressing hope that she would appreciate it. Luana, the princess, felt a surge of happiness as she accepted the gift, her thoughts lingering on the bracelet she had received the previous day. It had been a gesture from someone who barely knew her, a gift that might have gone to someone else had circumstances been different. This present, however, was undoubtedly meant for her, and the thought made her heart swell with joy. She voiced her gratitude, saying that it was the first time she felt truly happy to receive a gift. The prince's gaze then fell upon the bracelet on her wrist, observing that it seemed to be crafted by a skilled artisan, which made it unlikely to have come from Liliana. Deep in thought, Luana wondered silently whether, had her mother treated her as others did, she would still be there at all. Maria noticed her sudden change in mood and asked what was troubling her. Luana dismissed it, but Maria pressed on, pointing out that her tears told a different story. Luana questioned aloud whether it was possible for anyone to always be happy. Her emotions, fueled by the unexpected kindness from those around her, felt as though they were developing uncontrollably. Later, after Luana had fallen asleep, the prince turned to Adam and asked if he was accustomed to gifting in this manner. Adam replied that having a younger sister had taught him how to calm children. His 2-year-old sister, unlike him, had poor health and was confined to the house, giving Adam ample time to care for her. Meanwhile, Maria expressed her frustration over Luana's habit of eating chocolate before bed. She doubted whether anyone there was truly equipped to care for a child Luana's age, speculating that if her mother were informed, the situation would only worsen. The prince, however, interrupted firmly, forbidding such discussions about the empress. Reflecting on the past, the prince recalled how his mother had collapsed when his sister was stillborn after months of anticipation. The grief from that loss had been so intense that she no longer wished to live. This experience had led him to develop a special attachment to young girls like Luana, who reminded him of his lost sister. Even Selena, a 5-year-old whose mother was cruel, would be deeply affected if subjected to such treatment. The prince understood that, as the crown prince, he could control the rumors circulating within the palace, but gossip would inevitably spread throughout the capital. Some might pity Luana, given the harsh treatment by her biological mother, Liliana. However, many would use her half-royal heritage to disparage her, and her dignity could be damaged if Liliana sought to reclaim her. If that happened, Luana's situation could become dire. Despite his concern, he reassured Adam and Maria that his mother would recover soon, and once the time was right, he would discuss the matter with her. Adam reminded the prince of his pending duties, mentioning the stack of papers awaiting his attention. Before leaving, he asked Maria to continue looking after the princess. Maria, with evident enthusiasm, promised to take full responsibility for Luana's care. When Luana awoke, she found a bowl of soup prepared for her by Maria. It was delicious, and she remarked that it was the finest soup she had ever tasted. Luana noted that everything Maria made seemed to be exceptional. As Maria excused herself to attend to other tasks, she reassured Luana that she could call if she needed anything. Luana glanced at the bell but hesitated, fearing that ringing it might summon someone other than Maria. She recalled how the kitchen staff often eyed her with suspicion, questioning why Liliana's daughter was present. As she lay on the sofa, mulling over these thoughts, she noticed Adam sneaking into the room. He asked whether Maria was around, and upon confirming her absence, he presented Luana with a few chocolates he had hidden in his pocket. It was explained that the prince had been extremely busy in recent days, making it difficult for him to visit, though he had assured that he would make time soon. Gratitude was expressed by Luana, who accepted the chocolates with a gentle smile, appreciating the gesture despite the prince's absence. As she reflected on the situation, thoughts of her mother surfaced. It was recalled how, even in her previous life, she had grown accustomed to seeing her mother only once a week, and sometimes entire months would pass without any visit at all. While Adam was preparing to leave, an approaching voice was heard belonging to Maria. Upon hearing it, Adam hesitated, for he remembered that he had been told by Maria not to bring more sweets to Luana. However, it was sensed that the circumstances had changed. Maria soon entered the room, remarking that her arrival could have taken place sooner. In her hands was carried a small decorative tree, atop which a beautifully decorated cake had been placed, as though in celebration. Congratulations were extended to Luana, and it was announced that permission had finally been granted for her to enjoy some snacks. The surprise brought joy to Luana, who found herself delighted by the sight of the cake. Maria explained that the treat had been specially prepared as a gift and that no proper welcome had been arranged for Luana since her arrival at the palace. The remark was made that this occasion would serve as the celebration she had missed. With a graceful gesture, Maria knelt before Luana and expressed her appreciation for Luana's presence, offering words of gratitude that warmed Luana's heart. Feeling truly welcomed for the first time since arriving, Luana was overcome with happiness. However, just as she began to enjoy the treat, an unexpected interruption occurred when the prince entered the room without prior notice. His sudden appearance startled Luana, who choked on the food she had just begun to eat. A moment of discomfort was quickly recovered from, and it was suggested by Luana that future entrances should be announced by a knock at the door. The prince, observing her newly found boldness, remarked with some amusement that she had grown quite daring, considering that the palace was his residence and she was merely living in it. Luana's expression did not falter as she replied, noting that her initial impression of the prince had been a favorable one, although recent events had caused her to reconsider that judgment. The prince appeared momentarily taken aback by her response, while Adam, who had been quietly observing, took the opportunity to inquire whether the prince's teasing of Luana was intended to continue. The prince, instead of responding to Adam's query, produced a small, ornate box, which was then handed over to Luana. Inside the box, a gift was found, bringing a delighted smile to Luana's face. Her appreciation was expressed, but it was observed by the prince that her gratitude came easily, as though she could be charmed with the simplest of offerings. Luana was caught off guard by the comment, and in a moment of impulse, remarked that his words were unkind. Regret followed swiftly, for she realized almost immediately that she had spoken thoughtlessly. A worry arose in her mind that such words might prompt the prince to send her back to her mother, and she quickly apologized, confessing that her remark had been made without due consideration. To Luana's relief, the prince appeared unbothered by the incident, his response carrying a light-hearted tone. It was advised by him that she should be mindful not to overindulge, as her recovery was still ongoing. This prompted Luana to reflect on his manner, realizing that although he had often displayed a distant demeanor, he had never truly seemed angry at her, except perhaps during their first encounter. Even then, it had not seemed as though genuine hostility had been present. Feeling curious about the prince's true feelings towards her, a decision was made by Luana to test him. With a hint of playfulness, she remarked that the chocolate cake, though appearing delicious, had been placed too far away for her to reach comfortably. It was wondered by her whether the prince would react with irritation or annoyance. To her surprise, no such response was shown. Instead, the prince walked over to where the cake had been set and picked it up himself. As the cake was handed to Luana, she waited expectantly, her mouth slightly open in anticipation. The prince appeared to realize what was being implied by her gesture, and though a sigh of mild resignation escaped his lips, he did not hesitate further. A piece of the cake was picked up, and it was fed to Luana by the prince's own hand. Those who were present and witnessed the interaction noticed the subtle change in his behavior, recognizing that it reflected a departure from the sternness that had previously defined his character. At the Empress's palace, Adam and the prince were on their way to meet the Empress. As they walked through the castle, Adam questioned the prince about their purpose there. The prince replied that he needed to inform his mother promptly, as several days had already passed since the matter arose. Suddenly a woman appeared, exclaiming, "Your Highness!" She was Countess Chart. She inquired why the prince was at the Empress's palace. The prince informed her that he had come to see his mother, and then asked what had brought her there. The countess explained that the Empress was taking care of her mother. The prince acknowledged this, remarking that while it was indeed her duty to care for her family, his mother's kindness extended to her daughter Selina, whom he considered undeserving. He warned her not to overstep her boundaries. As he walked away, the countess called out, stating that the Empress loved Selina dearly and should treat her as if she were the prince's younger sister. A maid cautioned the countess about speaking too loudly in the palace, but the countess dismissed her, reminding the maid of her place. Inwardly, the countess reflected that, despite the prince's disdain, her daughter remained under the Empress's protection. She was determined to secure a future for Selena within the palace, even if it meant insisting that the Empress officially adopt her as a daughter. Inside the Empress's chambers, the prince found his mother, who welcomed him warmly and inquired about his visit. He stated that he had something important to discuss. The Empress invited him to sit, but his gaze fell on Selena, who was present in the room. The prince requested to speak privately, prompting Selena to rise and ask why she couldn't stay, claiming she was his younger sister. The prince firmly responded that he had only one sister, and although the other girl had left, it did not mean Selena could take her place. He clarified that Selena misunderstood the situation. His mother pitied her, but that did not grant her any claim over the palace or the royal family's future. Selena turned to the Empress, seeking support, but the Empress stated that, although she cared for Selena, the girl had overstepped this time. She then ordered for Selena to be escorted to the Countess and sternly warned her against spreading rumors about the prince's real sister. Once they were alone, the prince resumed the conversation, asking if his mother was ready to hear him out. The Empress encouraged him to continue. The prince reflected on his mother's resilience, likening her to a tree that bent with the wind but did not break. Despite previous objections from the late emperor, the current ruler had once taken the Empress as a concubine, a position she defended vigorously. The prince explained that, a few days prior, he had encountered a girl near Liliana's palace. She had been clothed in rags, her body covered in scars, and appeared malnourished. He added that he had taken her under his protection. Shocked, the Empress asked whether the girl had carried any message or indication of her identity. She admitted that having not visited Liliana's palace for some time, she was unaware of any rumors about Liliana's mistreatment. The Empress expressed her disapproval, chiding the prince for not informing her sooner. He apologized, and she decided that the girl must be seen immediately. The prince assured her that the girl was safe in his palace. They stood to leave, and as they did, the Empress acknowledged that, while she doubted the girl was her own daughter, it was still necessary to meet her in person. Princess 11. The Empress had always been haunted by the memory of her deceased child, a loss that left an unfillable void in her heart. When she first encountered Luana, the daughter of His Majesty's concubine and one of the twins, she had been struck by the uncanny resemblance the girl bore to her late daughter. It was as if time had frozen when Luana's eyes met hers, and her heart seemed to stop. The little girl's innocent smile brought a warmth the Empress had not felt in years. However, she had hesitated to express her affection openly, fearing the spread of rumors. She had deliberately kept her distance. Now, standing before Luana's door, the Empress found herself hesitating again. She had been lingering outside for a while, uncertain if she should enter. Maria, a maid who attended to Luana, approached and inquired if something was wrong. The Empress asked after the girl's well-being, and Maria reassured her that Luana had eaten some sweets and was resting. "She enjoys sweets very much, Your Majesty," Maria added, and the Empress responded that more should be brought for the girl next time. As they spoke, the prince appeared, noticing his mother's reluctance. He asked why she always wore a troubled expression whenever she saw Luana. The Empress offered no answer, silently wrestling with her own thoughts. "Is it right for me to care for this child as if she were my own?" she wondered. The prince urged her to come inside, insisting that they stop lingering at the door. Inside the room, Luana was fast asleep. The prince remarked on her resemblance to a cat, pointing out how she ate and slept in cycles. "Children her age need plenty of food to grow, especially a princess," Maria commented. When the Empress asked Luana's age, the prince reminded her that the girl had recently turned 8. The Empress found it difficult to believe, noting how small and frail Luana appeared. Regret flickered in her eyes as she thought about the time she had devoted solely to administrative duties, neglecting to visit the child herself. The prince suggested that they leave Luana to rest and attend to other matters. In the office, the Empress reviewed a report with one of the officials, a document detailing the state of the princess's palace. The man seemed taken aback, perhaps by the findings or by the Empress's direct involvement. He stammered an apology, expressing his regret over the mismanagement. The Empress acknowledged her share of the responsibility, admitting that as Empress, the condition of the palace fell under her jurisdiction as well. "It is time for me to take charge of the princess's budget directly," she declared, "and the powers granted to the concubine must be re-examined." The prince noted that the concubine might not take the news well, but the empress was resolute. "If she has grievances, she should bring them to me," she said, her tone unyielding. "Mercy is undeserved for anyone who has brought harm upon my child." As the conversation concluded, a small voice was heard outside the door. It was Luana, speaking to a servant named Adam, saying that she was hungry. The prince stepped out to find her, asking where Maria was and how she had come to be there alone. Luana explained that she had woken up and could not find Maria, so she wandered in search of food. The prince gently picked her up, turning to the empress. "It may be a bit early for dinner," he said, "but shall we eat together now?" The empress agreed, remarking that it would indeed be pleasant to share a meal. Luana was startled to realize that the woman standing before her was the empress herself. She turned toward the empress with a mix of awe and apprehension, wondering why the empress would be there. Though Luana had never felt any direct cruelty from her, she found it hard to believe that such a lofty figure could truly care for someone like herself. As they sat at the dining table, Luana's doubts lingered. The prince had noted that Luana had traveled all this way accompanied by strangers and had expressed a wish to meet his mother. When he first saw her, he had been puzzled by her presence. The empress, observing Luana, wondered aloud whether she was unable to eat because of the prince's presence. The prince responded calmly, saying it was not Luana's discomfort that prevented her from eating. She simply ate very little. Luana thought to herself that resisting the food was impossible, given how delicious it was. Noticing Luana struggling to cut her meat, the prince took it upon himself to help. His unexpected action caused visible surprise in both the empress and the maid Maria. The empress thought to herself that she had never anticipated such kindness from her son. Maria remarked that she had never seen the prince treat a stranger with such warmth. It made the empress question how well she truly knew him, for the prince's attitude towards Luana was markedly different from his coldness towards others like Selena. As she continued to observe Luana, the empress was struck by a sense of familiarity in the girl's appearance, almost as if she resembled someone she had once known, someone lost. Shaking off her thoughts, the empress encouraged everyone to continue eating, though she kept casting curious glances in Luana's direction. When dessert was served, Luana handed her portion to the prince, saying that he could have it. The prince asked why she was giving it to him. The empress teased Luana, asking if she intended to make the empress share her dessert. Luana replied that she did not want the dessert, even though the prince could see through her words. He knew how much she enjoyed food. The empress, now more intrigued, asked the prince if he himself was not hungry. The prince replied that he was not, though Luana then took a spoonful of the dessert and offered it to him, apologizing for having been the only one to indulge in such delicious food. The empress advised the prince to be cautious with his words and to avoid causing any trouble. She asked Adam if Maria usually looked after Luana, and the prince assured her that it was not a significant matter. The empress then surprised everyone by stating that she wished to take Luana with her, believing that the girl would enjoy her company. Luana, startled by the suggestion, silently questioned the empress's motive for wanting to bring her along. Was it to confront her mother? Despite these concerns, she found herself conflicted. Although she had initially felt indifferent towards the prince, Adam, and Maria, she had grown attached to this place, where she felt truly cared for. Noting Luana's hesitation, the empress relented, saying that if Luana preferred to remain there, she would not object. Just then, Manhwa entered the room, requesting the empress's attention on an urgent matter. Luana immediately tensed, suspecting that it might have something to do with her mother. The prince, seeing her unease, gently reminded her that certain matters were for adults to discuss, lifting her and stepping away from the conversation. Luana protested, concerned that the issue involved her mother. The empress then turned to Maria for an explanation. Maria informed her that the maids from Luana's palace had been searching for the girl. The empress asked whether Liliana had given the order for the search, but Maria was uncertain. She only knew that 2 or 3 maids had discreetly looked for Luana. With a thoughtful expression, the empress suggested they wait and see how Liliana would react to the situation. She then changed the topic abruptly, asking Maria about the kind of sweets she preferred. Loana was surprised to see the assortment of sweets laid out before her on the table. She inquired whether they had been sent by the Empress. It was confirmed by Maria that the gifts indeed came from the Empress, and it was suggested that Loana must have a fondness for sweets. As she gazed at the treats, Loana hesitated, uncertain whether such a gift should be accepted. A small box among the sweets drew her attention, and she asked what it contained. It was explained by Maria that the box held a special dessert, one that would dissolve on the tongue with an almost overwhelming sweetness. Curiosity getting the better of her, Loana opened the box and sampled the dessert. As it melted in her mouth, she recalled a similar taste from a dream. But now the sweetness was real and vivid, unlike anything she had tasted before. It became clear to her what had been meant when it was said that the dessert would dissolve so delicately. Loana's reaction was observed by Maria, who noted that the taste was indeed extraordinary, and it was further mentioned that the bottle was made of crystal. The revelation left Loana in disbelief. She had not expected the container of a mere dessert to be crafted from such a valuable material. It was assured by Maria that everything offered by the Empress would possess a value far beyond the ordinary. However, despite these assurances, Loana could not dispel her unease. It seemed to her that she had done nothing to earn such kindness, and doubts arose in her mind about whether she deserved it. She confided that the sudden generosity made her uncomfortable, as if the kindness could vanish without warning. Loana's concerns were addressed by Maria, who suggested that it was not unusual for someone of Loana's age to receive gifts without any expectation of giving something in return. Yet, if it would help her feel at ease, expressing gratitude to the Empress was said to be more than enough. As Loana reflected on the kindness also shown by the Crown Prince, it was acknowledged that she felt a deep sense of appreciation for the actions taken on her behalf. Still, she found it difficult to shake the feeling of being unworthy of such gestures. When Loana expressed the belief that she might be resented by the Empress and the Crown Prince, her worries were dismissed. It was pointed out that anyone who met her would be charmed, just as Maria had been. However, Loana could not help but respond that she was merely a princess in name, having nothing of true value to offer. It was observed that, unlike Maria, who was considered highly desirable by many, Loana felt she could give nothing in return for such generosity. Maria, seeing Loana's struggle, assured her that meeting her had been an honor and urged her to have more confidence. It was reminded that despite her doubts, Loana still held a significant position within the empire. Her concerns regarding her mother's history were also dismissed, with Maria stating that Liliana's association had never been officially acknowledged within the imperial lineage. It was emphasized that the Empress held the highest authority and that one day the Crown Prince would inherit the throne. Any worries Loana had about her own standing were considered unnecessary. To further ease her mind, a suggestion was made to prepare a gift of gratitude for the Empress, a batch of cookies. Loana hesitated, wondering if the Empress would even appreciate such a simple offering, but it was confidently suggested by Maria that the Empress would likely enjoy them if they were presented by Loana herself. It was then decided that chocolate chips would be added, as Loana was known to like them, and the cookies would be made so delicious that anyone who tasted them would surely want more. This small act seemed to bring Loana some comfort, as it allowed her to express her thanks in a tangible way. Though modest, the gesture was seen as a genuine expression of her gratitude. Despite using the same dough and molds as Maria, the results were starkly different. Maria's cookies looked elegant, while Loana's appeared less refined. Uncertain about their quality, Loana remarked to Maria that they might not be worth presenting and suggested discarding them. Maria, however, assured her that they looked delicious and believed the Empress would appreciate them, as they could evoke memories of the prince's childhood. Still unconvinced, Loana doubted the cookies' quality, but Maria encouraged her to trust in her efforts. Loana then remembered there was another person she wanted to share the cookies with, Adam. When she presented the cookies to him, Adam expressed genuine delight, thanking her for the personal touch. He observed, "The cookies are shaped like raccoons, aren't they?" Loana corrected him, explaining they were actually meant to resemble bears. Adam, nonetheless, was sincerely appreciative, saying he would cherish her thoughtful gesture. Loana found his response comforting, as he made no criticism about the cookies. Maria, standing nearby, remarked that Loana had made them with love and sincerity. At that moment, the prince entered the room. Adam eagerly showed him the cookies, but the prince was not impressed and questioned what they were supposed to be. Adam urged him to look closely, insisting they were charming. The prince dismissed Adam's suggestion, stating that his own tastes were hard to satisfy. He then bluntly told Loana that she was not skilled in cooking, causing her to doubt whether the cookies had pleased him at all. Maria interjected, noting that the cookies seemed familiar, perhaps reminiscent of an event she had attended during her youth. This comment sparked a memory for the prince, who recalled making similar cookies in his childhood. Reconsidering, he softened his stance and acknowledged that, upon a closer look, the cookies were acceptable and showed a hint of talent. Loana felt relieved and pleased that the prince had given some form of praise, even if it was hesitant. Maria then observed that, despite Loana's apparent lack of experience, her effort and sincerity were what mattered most. She mentioned that the cookies reminded her of the past and even suggested that Loana shared some similarities with herself. Encouraged by this, Loana declared with determination that she would strive to surpass the prince's skill. Her words surprised the prince, as she had inadvertently addressed him as brother. Immediately, Loana was filled with concern, wondering if she had overstepped and if an apology was needed. Yet, before she could say anything, the prince gently lifted her and remarked on her use of the term brother. Loana was overcome with emotion, realizing that instead of being offended, the prince continued to smile warmly at her. She thought to herself how kind-hearted those around her truly were. Later that evening, the prince stayed by Loana's side as she drifted off to sleep. Maria entered the room quietly and saw Loana resting while holding the prince's hand. The prince noticed Maria's arrival and reassured her, "It's fine, you may leave." He remained seated, deep in thought, as he watched over Loana. He reflected on the peculiar sense of familiarity he had felt since their first meeting. Though he knew Loana was Liliana's daughter, he could not help but think of her as a little sister. As he contemplated his feelings, the prince resolved to stay beside Loana until she awoke. He mused over her future, wondering whether she would follow in her mother's footsteps or choose to remain by his side. When morning came, Loana awoke to find the prince still there, resting beside her. His quiet presence stirred a sense of comfort and connection she had not expected. When he opened his eyes, she was startled, and the prince, noticing her reaction, remarked that she always seemed surprised to see him. Just then, Maria entered, explaining that Loana's discomfort was likely due to the prince's intimidating presence, something she had warned about before. The prince, addressing Loana again, questioned her about crying, pointing out that his hand still ached because she had clung to it throughout the night. Loana, still surprised, admitted she hadn't realized he was asleep next to her. The prince, amused, accused her of pretending to sleep while watching him. His comment carried an unintended harshness, and Maria was taken aback, while the prince regretted mentioning anything that might remind Loana of painful memories associated with Liliana. He quickly tried to change the subject, asking her to disregard his words. However, Loana retorted that even the crown prince could be deceptive, reminding him that she hadn't expected to wake up next to him. The prince gently placed his hand on her shoulder, remarking that they bore a striking resemblance. Then, he began to search for something around the room. When Loana informed him that, since it was her chamber, there would be nothing of his there, Maria mentioned that he seemed to be looking for cookies. Loana confessed that she hadn't baked any the previous day, thinking he didn't like them. She promised to bring him something else next time, playfully noting that he must be disappointed to miss out on the treats she had made with love. Turning to Maria, Loana asked her to arrange some food for the prince if he was hungry. Maria agreed, adding that Loana would need to practice her baking more, as it seemed the prince had a greater fondness for cookies than they had anticipated. While Maria left to handle the request, Loana reflected on her journey. When she had first come to the palace, her sole aim had been survival. But now, she was determined to prove her worth to the prince and everyone else, feeling proud of the progress she had made. Meanwhile, in the Empress's office, Count Cher stood before her. the Empress inquired about his visit, and he explained that his wife and daughter wished to offer their apologies in person but were unable to come to the palace. When asked if this was related to a missed invitation, the Count clarified that his daughter Selina had been striving to be a better person. He described how distraught she had been, promising that the incident wouldn't happen again if forgiveness could be granted. The Empress, acknowledging that Selina was still young, conceded that perhaps she had been too harsh and suggested they have lunch together. Later, Selina returned to the palace, addressing the Empress as her mother. She expressed her regret over her previous disregard for the imperial family, acknowledging her past mistakes. The Empress reassured her, saying that she understood it hadn't been intentional, though her thoughts wandered to Loana. Unintentionally, she found herself comparing Loana's stature to Selina's, something she knew she shouldn't be doing. Selina noticed that the Empress's attention seemed divided, and soon enough, a maid entered with a gift for the Empress, a basket of cakes prepared by Loana as a gesture of gratitude. The Empress was delighted and inquired whether Loana had made them herself. Seeing the Empress so pleased made Selina envious. Driven by jealousy, Selina stood up and pointed out that many of the cakes appeared burnt, suggesting they might be harmful. She questioned what Loana had been thinking, accusing her of insulting the Empire with such an offering. Without warning, Selina shoved the basket off the table, sending the cakes tumbling to the floor. The Empress's expression darkened as she reprimanded Selina, stating that despite her efforts to appear more mature, her behavior remained exaggerated and reckless. She warned that any further insult would not be tolerated, then ordered the maids to escort Selina out of the palace. As Selina pleaded for mercy, the Empress's concern shifted to the cakes, most of which were now ruined. The once thoughtful gift lay scattered, nearly empty, leaving the Empress troubled. Selina could still vividly recall the first time she saw the Empress, whom she always referred to as her aunt. The Empress had become a figure of inspiration for her from that very moment, embodying the grace and elegance Selina aspired to possess. Selina took every opportunity to visit the Empress, who reciprocated with warmth and affection. She cherished these visits, secretly wishing to be regarded as the Empress's own daughter. However, recent events had marred the once peaceful environment. While passing by a gathering of noblewomen, Selina overheard them gossiping about her. They questioned how someone like the Empress's niece could be left to suffer alone, implying that Selina had fallen out of favor. Another woman suggested that Selina's misfortune must have been a result of the Empress's disapproval. Despite Selina's attempts to defend herself, claiming that the Empress had always cared for her, the women remained unconvinced. One went as far as to say that Selina had merely been pretending to belong to the royal family, hinting that her position was not as secure as she imagined. Their conversation soon shifted to Loana, the young lady recently taken under the Empress's wing. It was remarked that the Empress treated Loana with a level of care usually reserved for a daughter, even spoiling her with treats. The comparison to Loana, who was now being regarded as a true princess, stung deeply. Frustrated and unable to bear their words any longer, Selina left the room, her mind set on a course of action. Determined not to be overshadowed, Selina sought her father's support, insisting that he persuade the Empress to send Loana away. Her father listened as Selina, her voice filled with indignation, urged him to remove Loana from the palace. Meanwhile, in the Empress's private chambers, a conversation unfolded between the Empress and one of her maids. The Empress inquired about the recent developments concerning Liliana, to which the maid responded that Loana was being sought after by the other attendants, with considerable interest shown in her presence. The Empress mused over the matter, noting that arrangements for the palace budget and Loana's guardianship would need to be addressed, and a discussion with the prince seemed inevitable. Elsewhere, Loana found herself surrounded by an array of garments, brought by Maria, an attendant close to her. Loana questioned the sudden influx of clothes, expressing curiosity over the purpose behind it. Maria, brushing off the specifics for the moment, encouraged Loana to choose an outfit that suited her. She explained that these clothes were from her own youth, and assured Loana that soon a designer would be summoned to provide even more exquisite attire. Loana sensed that there was more to this situation than what was being disclosed, and asked if something was being planned. Maria hinted at a luncheon arranged by the Empress, adding that it was meant to be kept under wraps. She also mentioned the Empress's unusual interest in some biscuits, suggesting that the delicacies had made a lasting impression on her. As Maria busied herself preparing Loana, the young lady's attention was drawn to a particular dress that caught her eye. Maria agreed, noting that they shared a similar taste, and suggested they wear the dress for the day. When Maria proposed buying more dresses later, Loana hesitated, explaining that she had no money. Maria reassured her, saying that as a royal, Loana had inherited significant wealth from the late emperor, and it would be no trouble to buy her clothes. Loana felt uneasy about receiving so much, thinking that she did not want to be a burden. Maria, sensing her hesitation, insisted that there was no time to waste, and that Loana needed to dress well for her meeting with the Empress. When Loana nervously questioned whether she could really visit the Queen, Maria reminded her that the Empress was indeed her mother, Liliana. She added that anyone who had the fortune to give birth to an imperial princess was blessed, encouraging Loana to embrace her status. Once Loana was dressed, Maria declared everything ready except for the shoes, suggesting a pair of red ones she had seen earlier. As soon as the color was mentioned, a memory resurfaced for Loana, a room covered in blood and a vivid image of her own death. She abruptly told Maria she did not wish to wear the shoes. At that moment, the prince entered, observing Loana's reluctance. He questioned why shoes, which were essential for walking, were being refused. Then, without waiting for a response, he lifted Loana in his arms and assured her that he would carry her all day, making shoes unnecessary. Maria still attempted to persuade them, mentioning that the shoes would complement the dress perfectly, but the prince dismissed the idea, stating that his mother was waiting, and they needed to leave. As the prince and Loana departed, Adam stopped Maria, pointing out that Loana had clearly been unsettled by the sight of the shoes. He suggested they wait until she was ready to talk about it, and Maria agreed, hoping that one day Loana would open up about her fears. As they walked through the palace, the prince inquired if Loana had always disliked shoes so intensely. She admitted that the shoes were indeed beautiful, but explained that the sight of the red color disturbed her, though she could not fully articulate why. The prince immediately declared that there would be no red shoes in the future, reassuring her that no one would challenge her choice, not even the Empress. Loana asked if her mother would really allow it, and the prince promised that even if Liliana objected, he would protect her. Adam joined in, pledging his protection as well. Loana felt a small sense of relief, sensing her fear beginning to fade. They reached the Empress's palace, a prominent place within the imperial grounds, where the courtiers whispered amongst themselves as the princess entered, cradled in the prince's arms. Some murmured that the child seemed familiar, but soon their attention shifted to Loana. She felt the weight of their stares and grew uncomfortable, prompting the prince to give a commanding glance that made the onlookers bow quickly in respect. Amidst the gathering, Loana noticed a man standing at a distance and asked the prince who he was. The prince identified him as the Duke of Esteban. Loana felt a faint recognition, as though she had seen him before, but could not place the memory. In the crowd, one of Liliana's maids spotted Loana and hurriedly decided that the Empress must be informed of the princess's appearance. Loana, accompanied by the prince and Adam, stepped into the grandiose halls of the Empress's palace. As her eyes roamed over the intricate carvings, gilded walls, and shimmering chandeliers, she couldn't help but express her admiration. It was remarked by her that the palace was one of the most beautiful places she had ever seen. The prince, pleased by her awe, explained the origin of its splendor. He stated that the Empress's palace had always been renowned for its luxury and magnificence, not just as a symbol of power, but as evidence of the eternal happiness of the first emperor and empress. He added that the first empress had been an imp who married the first emperor, an extraordinary union that brought immense joy to the kingdom. It was because of their enduring love that such a magnificent palace had been built. Loana listened intently, her curiosity piqued by the mention of imps and orcs. She hesitated for a moment before asking if orcs truly existed. Her question was met with a gentle smile from the prince, who assured her that they did. He explained that orcs were indeed real, though they were different from ordinary people. Then, with a mysterious gleam in his eyes, he confided that, thanks to the first empress, beings like him could disguise their true forms. It was suggested by him that Loana might one day see his real form, "When?" she asked, her voice tinged with excitement and curiosity. The prince responded playfully, hinting that perhaps next year's grand celebration would provide such an opportunity. Luana's face lit up at the thought, her eagerness evident as she expressed her anticipation. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of a maid. She approached with a warm smile and offered to give them a tour of the palace. The prince, slightly startled, gently admonished her for not informing him beforehand. However, the maid explained that she had refrained from announcing herself earlier because the pair seemed so happy together. When the prince inquired about his mother, the maid informed them that the empress was in the kitchen, personally preparing a meal to welcome them. Luana, feeling out of place as the daughter of a concubine, found herself surprised by the kindness and warmth she received from the palace staff. In her heart, she had anticipated animosity, or at least indifference, yet the reality was entirely different. Her expression betrayed her unease, prompting the prince to reassure her. He encouraged her to relax and not to worry, teasing that the empress wasn't about to prey on her. Despite his attempts to comfort her, Luana couldn't shake her uncertainty. She was still trying to figure out how to deal with someone as important as the empress. When they entered the grand chamber, the empress was already present, seated regally yet exuding warmth. She turned to her maid Emma and remarked that the prince and Luana made a charming pair. Emma nodded in agreement, her smile reflecting her approval. Luana and the prince were directed to their seats, though Emma teasingly pointed out that a separate chair had been prepared for Luana. The prince brushed off the comment with a dismissive wave, stating that it wasn't necessary since he would carry Luana all day if needed. The empress's sharp eyes caught sight of Luana's bare feet, and she inquired about it with gentle concern. The prince, quick to answer, explained that Luana had no need for shoes as long as he was there to carry her. The empress, visibly amused by his response, let the matter rest, and soon the table was filled with an array of delicious dishes. As the meal commenced, the empress turned her attention to Luana and asked her opinion about her experience so far. Before Luana could respond, the prince began feeding her, a gesture that drew a chuckle from the empress. She rose from her seat and declared that she wished to feed Luana as well, offering her some candy with a playful smile. The light-hearted moment was interrupted when a man burst into the room, announcing the arrival of a courtesan. The word sent a jolt through Luana, and her face paled as a sudden thought struck her. She turned to the prince and asked in a trembling voice if it was possible that her mother was here because of her. The empress, sensing Luana's distress, moved closer and gently assured her that she could be trusted. She requested Luana to wait for her, explaining that she wished to spend time with the daughter she had long been unable to see. The word daughter echoed in Luana's mind, stirring a whirlwind of emotions. It was a term she had never heard her own mother use, and its warmth left her feeling strangely relieved. A sense of security, foreign yet comforting, enveloped her as she reflected on the empress's words. For the first time, she felt as though someone truly wished to protect her. As the empress began walking toward the courtesan, Luana remained seated, her thoughts a tangled mix of uncertainty and hope. She realized that something within her had shifted. An unfamiliar yet reassuring feeling of belonging had taken root in her heart. Liliana paced angrily in her chambers, her fury evident as she confronted a trembling maid. She demanded to know if it was true that Luana, the female protagonist, had been taken to the empress's palace. Liliana flung a stack of papers at the maid and insisted that they be read aloud. The maid, barely able to steady her shaking hands, read the proclamation. It stated that the empress's palace would henceforth manage all matters concerning Luana and take full responsibility for her welfare. Liliana's eyes narrowed with rage as she interrogated the maid, accusing the palace staff of allowing Luana to leave with the prince without informing her. Liliana's voice dripped with venom, as she remarked that if this had been disclosed earlier, the situation could have been addressed properly. She threatened severe punishment for those involved, her frustration boiling over. Frightened, the maid stammered an apology before scurrying out of the room. Liliana, consumed by her anger, hurled a teacup to the floor. Her thoughts raced as she concluded that Luana had been hidden in the empress's palace deliberately. She vowed to punish the girl severely when she returned. Liliana scoffed at Luana's audacity to leave without her permission, believing she had complete control over her daughter. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the emperor. Sensing his concern, Liliana masked her emotions and assured him that nothing was amiss. She placed a hand on his forehead, using her magic to calm him, and sent him away. Alone again, Liliana mused about Luana's position at the palace. Despite her outward anger, she thought of Luana as a possession she had trained, someone whose every move she controlled. A wicked smile spread across her face as she plotted her next move. Meanwhile, as the prince prepared to leave the palace, Luana anxiously grasped the edge of his cloak, inquiring about his destination. Though he dismissed her concerns, Luana suspected he intended to visit Liliana. She pleaded with him, warning that meeting her mother could be dangerous. Luana's thoughts were consumed by fear, remembering Liliana's cruel nature. The prince, kneeling to meet her gaze, reassured Luana with a confident smile, insisting he was stronger than she thought. He urged her to wait patiently for his return before departing. Despite his words, Luana remained uneasy. Maria, her companion, attempted to distract her by suggesting a game, but Luana was too preoccupied with worry. At the Empress's palace, Liliana sat sipping tea, impatiently awaiting an audience. She remarked to her attendants about the Empress's habit of making guests wait. One maid, speaking cautiously, reminded Liliana that her early arrival was the reason for the delay and that she should be grateful for the Empress's leniency. Liliana's eyes flashed with resentment, feeling slighted by her status as a concubine. She silently vowed revenge, fantasizing about destroying the palace once her son Louis ascended the throne. When the Empress finally appeared, Liliana was startled to see the crown prince accompanying her. The prince's calm demeanor unsettled Liliana further as he remarked that her presence seemed unwelcome. Liliana feigned ignorance, claiming she had no idea the prince would accompany the Empress. The Empress wasted no time demanding Liliana state her business. Liliana declared that her daughter was missing, but the Empress retorted that the matter had already been addressed in the document sent to her. Liliana, indignant, argued that as Luana's mother she had the right to reclaim her child. The Empress countered that Luana, as a princess, belonged in the palace under her care. The discussion grew heated as the prince interjected. He challenged Liliana's claim to motherhood, accusing her of mistreating Luana. He presented reports detailing the poor state of Luana's health during her time in Liliana's care, citing them as evidence of neglect. He declared that Luana would remain under the Empress's protection from that day forward. Liliana, desperate, attempted to defend herself. She suggested that her treatment of Luana was being judged unfairly because of her status as a concubine. She lashed out, insinuating that the Empress's interest in Luana was motivated by personal failures with her own child. The prince's attention was drawn to a faint noise nearby. He moved to investigate but found only a single slipper on the ground, the owner having disappeared. Roughly an hour earlier, Maria had stepped into Luana's chamber, only to find her fast asleep beneath a thick blanket. The soft rise and fall of her breath suggested she was deep in slumber, undisturbed by the midday light streaming through the windows. Maria couldn't help but pause, her gaze lingering on the sleeping girl. She assumed that Luana was still upset by the recent departure of the prince and the Empress. A sympathetic sigh escaped her as she placed a tray of snacks on the nearby table. Speaking softly, more to herself than to the sleeping figure, she remarked that the food should be eaten once Luana woke. With a gentle shake of her head, Maria thought it better to let her sleep, believing rest would help soothe her troubled heart. Quietly, she exited the room, taking care not to wake her. However, the moment Maria left, Luana stirred. Beneath the blanket, she had hidden a small teddy bear, clutching it tightly to her chest as though it were her anchor. Now determination lit up her eyes. Casting the bear aside, she made up her mind. She couldn't stay idle while the prince and the Empress were in danger because of her mother. Her sense of responsibility outweighed her fear, and she decided to act. Stepping out of the palace, Luana felt an unfamiliar blend of excitement and trepidation. This was her first time venturing outside alone. The grand palace gates had always seemed imposing, yet today they marked the start of a daunting journey. She hesitated, unsure of where to begin. Without any clear direction, she wandered aimlessly through the same paths, doubling back as uncertainty gnawed at her. The sprawling expanse of the outside world felt overwhelming, and she grew increasingly anxious about being caught. The thought of Maria realizing her absence sent pangs of guilt through her chest. She's probably looking for me now, Lawana thought, glancing nervously over her shoulder. For a fleeting moment, she considered returning to her chamber, but the memory of the prince's kind smile steeled her resolve. She reminded herself that she couldn't abandon him to face the dangers posed by her mother. It was then that something strange caught her eye. A few droplets of water floated inexplicably in the air before her, glistening like tiny jewels. Lawana blinked, unsure if she was imagining things, but the droplets remained. A faint tug in her heart urged her to follow them. Trusting her instincts, she did so, her steps tentative at first but growing more confident as she moved forward. The droplets seemed to guide her, leading her further from the palace and deeper into the woods. After some time, Lawana found herself standing near a secluded clearing. Her breath hitched as she spotted familiar figures. Prince Kale and the Empress were standing a short distance away, speaking to a woman Lawana recognized as Liliana. Concealing herself behind a tree, she strained to hear their conversation. What she heard sent chills down her spine. Liliana's voice carried a sharp edge as she spoke about the Empress's deceased daughter. Lawana's heart raced when she caught the chilling words. "Doesn't your daughter bear a striking resemblance to her?" Lawana's mind reeled. Her chest tightened with fear and guilt as she realized the full gravity of the situation. Overcome with panic, she turned and fled, her footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath her. Thoughts swirled in her mind, each one more distressing than the last. She blamed herself for the troubles that had befallen the Empress and the Prince. "I came here only to survive," she reflected bitterly. "But they gave me so much love. Love I don't deserve." Tears welled in her eyes as she questioned everything, her decisions, her worth, and whether it had been wrong to seek refuge with them in the first place. Unable to suppress her turmoil, Lawana sank to the ground, wrapping her arms around her knees. She felt utterly useless, her confidence shattered. Just as despair threatened to consume her, a gentle voice broke through the silence. Startled, she looked up to see a vision of herself. Older, perhaps 18 years of age, standing before her. This spectral version of Lawana spoke with calm reassurance, reminding her that her path was her own to forge. "Your future is different from mine," the older Lawana said. "It is in your hands to shape it." As quickly as she had appeared, the vision vanished, leaving Lawana awash with a newfound sense of purpose. Before she could fully comprehend what had happened, the sound of footsteps drew her attention. Prince Kyle approached, his expression a mix of relief and exasperation. His voice, though stern, carried an unmistakable warmth as he told her how long he had been searching for her. Overwhelmed by guilt, Lawana apologized profusely, explaining that she had only wanted to protect him and the Empress from her mother's schemes. Her voice trembled as she admitted she didn't feel worthy of the kindness they had shown her. "Do I even deserve to stay here?" she asked, her eyes brimming with tears. The prince's response was immediate and unwavering. He assured her that, regardless of what happened, she was his sister, and this was her home. His words struck a chord deep within her, and Lawana couldn't hold back her tears. Overcome with emotion, she flung her arms around him, finding solace in his embrace. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to cry openly, releasing the pent-up pain and doubt that had weighed her down. She thanked him repeatedly, her gratitude spilling forth like a torrent. Exhausted by the day's events, Lawana eventually fell asleep beside the prince. When she stirred later, his voice was gentle as he told her to rest a little longer. Obediently, she returned to bed, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Not long after, Maria entered the room. The prince raised a finger to his lips, signaling for her to remain quiet. "She's still asleep," he whispered. Together they left the room, ensuring Lawana's peaceful slumber remained undisturbed. In the quiet that followed, the faint traces of a smile lingered on Lawana's lips, a testament to the love and acceptance she had finally allowed herself to feel. Adam, an advisor to the Crown Prince, approached the prince with a set of papers, explaining that a thorough investigation had been conducted. He stated that the bracelet acquired by the princess had been traced back to its origins. By consulting the artisan who crafted the jewelry and utilizing the info syndicate, the truth behind the bracelet's logo, a distinctive crown, was uncovered. The prince, upon recognizing the emblem, deduced that it belonged to Duc Estébien. He remarked that, while the Duke appeared amiable to everyone, giving such a valuable gift to a young girl seemed suspicious. Adam agreed, asserting that the young lady should no longer be left unattended. Maria, who stood beside them, silently disagreed with their conclusions. To herself, she thought their suspicions were unfounded. She found it unlikely that the Duke could have recognized the princess's true identity at the time, given her unassuming demeanor. Still, Maria couldn't help but muse that the gesture might have been motivated by love. When she voiced her thoughts, suggesting that the Duke might have been captivated by the girl's beauty, the prince and Adam dismissed her idea, though it left them somewhat perplexed. The prince curtly instructed Adam to remain vigilant and prepare for any eventuality, adding that much to his dismay, he would have to meet the Duke personally. Meanwhile, in a tranquil setting beneath a tree, Karan, the boy who had originally possessed the bracelet, sat lost in thought. When his father approached, Karan preemptively declared his reluctance to attend another party. His father, unfazed, informed him that the bracelet's whereabouts had been discovered. Shocked, Karan's mind immediately turned to the girl who had taken it. However, when asked if he wished to know more, Karan retorted that he was no longer curious, dismissing his father abruptly. Later, Karan's father met with the Empress, proposing a plan to forge a bond between his son and the princess. He suggested that given their similar age and compatible temperaments, the arrangement would be mutually beneficial. The Empress, while not outright rejecting the idea, expressed her concern that such an arrangement might fuel misunderstandings. Karan's father countered by emphasizing his son's merits, both in status and character, and proposed that such an alliance would deter unwanted suitors. The Empress, weighing the advantages, considered it a strategic opportunity, especially as it might prevent Liliana from meddling with the princess again. She decided to discuss the matter with the Crown Prince. Back at the palace, Luana lay on her bed, expressing a desire to see the Empress. Maria attempted to lift her spirits, mentioning that Adam had promised to bring a gift. Observing Maria's excitement while speaking of Adam, Luana couldn't suppress her curiosity. Pulling Maria aside, she inquired about her relationship with Adam, pointing out the subtle glances and smiles they often exchanged. Maria, flustered, dismissed the suggestion, questioning why Luana had suddenly brought it up. Before the conversation could continue, the Crown Prince entered the room, followed closely by Adam, each carrying gifts. Luana greeted them warmly, her earlier curiosity now redirected. Seizing the moment, she teasingly asked Adam about his opinion of Maria. Before Adam could respond, Maria interjected, urging them to focus on the gifts. Adam handed Luana several boxes, explaining that he had been uncertain of her preferences, but was now confident she would enjoy the contents. Inside were items carefully chosen to align with Luana's tastes. Adam mentioned how sampling her cookies had helped him understand her likes, noting their shared preferences. Luana was taken aback by Adam's admission that he had eaten the cookies she made. She recalled how they had looked misshapen and unappealing, and she had assumed no one would enjoy them. Her surprise was evident, but Adam's sincerity softened her self-doubt. Among the items was a small, beautifully wrapped box that he handed to her with a hopeful expression. The Crown Prince, who was present, immediately grew curious. He questioned Adam about the box's contents, but Adam suggested that Luana herself should open it. However, a wave of apprehension swept over her. She wondered how Adam could have interpreted her tastes so accurately, yet feared the gift might be based on something she had previously given him, perhaps in a way that would fail to meet her expectations. Despite her worries, she decided to approach the situation with optimism. She expressed her appreciation for the effort Adam had put into the gift, even though she secretly braced herself for disappointment. Noticing her hesitation, the Crown Prince stepped forward. With a teasing remark, he offered to open the box first, suggesting it might spare her the trouble. Luana, caught between her curiosity and unease, handed the box over. However, the prince's jest did not end there. He teased her further, implying that her quick surrender of the gift suggested a lack of interest. Flustered, Luana responded that her hesitation was merely an attempt to avoid any misunderstandings on Adam's part. Turning to Maria, who stood nearby, the crown prince suggested that she should open the box instead. He humorously proposed that perhaps Maria's supposed power of love would make the task easier. However, Maria declined, insisting that the responsibility should remain with Luana. Encouraged by Maria's words, Luana tried to steel herself mentally, though her unease persisted. Eventually, the crown prince took matters into his own hands. He opened the box, but as soon as he looked inside, his expression darkened. A grimace crossed his face as he closed the lid and handed the box to Maria. In a tone that blended mockery and seriousness, he instructed her to dispose of the contents by burning them. Adam, visibly shocked, asked for an explanation. Luana, her curiosity now piqued to an unbearable degree, pleaded to see the gift. However, the prince refused firmly. He claimed that the contents were unsuitable for her and might harm her mental well-being. Turning back to Adam, he issued a warning, advising him to refrain from creating gifts that reflected his personal tastes in the future. Adam, though visibly disappointed, accepted the rebuke with a promise to remember it. Luana, despite the prince's dismissal, found herself unable to let the matter go. She reminded him that the gift had been made specifically for her and expressed a desire to keep it. The prince, unimpressed, asked if she even knew what the gift was. Before she could answer, he turned to Maria and ordered her to reveal the truth. Maria hesitated briefly before explaining that the item in question was a cookie, an attempt by Adam to create something authentic. Though Luana felt a pang of regret, she apologized to Adam. She praised his efforts, assuring him that his intentions had been admirable, even though she couldn't accept the gift. Her words, though kind, did little to alleviate the tension. The crown prince, noticing her lingering curiosity, sought to redirect her attention. He informed her that he had a gift of his own to present, one he had acquired some time ago. When Luana asked about its nature, the prince revealed that it had originally been part of his personal collection. However, he assured her that he was willing to part with it for her sake. While the prince spoke, Maria observed the exchange with quiet amusement. She silently critiqued the contrasting tastes of the men in the palace, finding their approaches to gift-giving equally puzzling. However, Luana's interest in the prince's promise grew. She asked Maria if she had any idea what the gift might be, but Maria denied any knowledge. After a brief pause, Maria changed the subject by asking Luana if she enjoyed reading books. Luana hesitated before admitting that she had never read one. Maria, upon hearing this, expressed surprise. She quickly reassured Luana that there was no shame in being unfamiliar with books, suggesting that they could explore the library together and begin with something simple. Moved by Maria's enthusiasm, Luana found herself struggling to reveal the truth. She could, in fact, read. However, before she could confess, Maria had already made plans to personally read fairy tales to her. Luana, deeply touched by this gesture, found herself reflecting on her past. In her previous life, she had been neglected and left to fend for herself, even during moments of grave illness. The idea of someone reading stories to her was so foreign that it felt almost unreal. Comparing her current situation to the struggles of her past, she was overwhelmed by a sense of gratitude. Maria, meanwhile, had begun selecting a story for their first reading session. She chose a book titled The Founding of the First Emperor and Empress and presented it to Luana with a bright smile. She explained that it was a fairy tale and suggested it would be a fitting introduction to the world of books. Luana accepted the suggestion with a warm smile of her own. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of belonging that she had long believed was beyond her reach. The prospect of exploring stories with Maria filled her with anticipation, and she allowed herself to look toward the future with newfound optimism. Maria began recounting a story to Luana, explaining that it was a love story passed down through generations. The tale began in a small, peaceful village where a boy with extraordinary blonde hair lived. His hair was so radiant that even in complete darkness, it seemed to shimmer as if lit by an inner glow. Turning to Loana, Maria observed that her hair bore a resemblance to the boy's. Loana, however, expressed uncertainty, unsure if her hair truly matched the description. Maria clarified that while many people had blonde hair, this boy's was remarkably unique, as though touched by magic itself. The story continued with an unexpected misfortune that struck the boy's village. To protect his home, the boy embarked on a journey during which he encountered an elf of extraordinary beauty. This elf, with her striking blue hair and the ability to wield ice, became his ally. Together, they confronted and defeated the enemy that had threatened his village. Hearing this, Loana recalled her brother mentioning a similar tale about the first queen of their kingdom. She commented that the elf in the story sounded exactly like the queen. Maria confirmed this, adding that Loana's eyes might have been inherited from her. Loana found herself reflecting on her resemblance to the queen. Her eyes, identical in color to those described in the story, made her wonder if she was more than just a distant descendant. For the first time, the thought that she might truly be connected to royalty crossed her mind. Maria continued narrating how the boy had gone on to build a grand palace in the heart of his village. He had eventually married the elf, who had agreed to the union under specific conditions. Loana, filled with curiosity, questioned the nature of these conditions and the misfortune that had befallen the village. She also asked why the boy's childhood friend, a red-haired figure who had shed tears while blessing the couple, had appeared so suddenly in the story. Maria admitted that many parts of the story felt incomplete, as if significant details had been omitted. She explained that the tale was likely an amalgamation of various floating stories and legends. While the existence of the village and the elf might have been rooted in truth, elements like the red-haired friend seemed fabricated. However, Loana couldn't shake the feeling that the story's details, especially the mention of the friend, resonated with her deeply. Maria offered to read the story from the book again, but Loana declined, claiming to remember it in its entirety. Maria remarked on how vividly Loana seemed to recall the tale, particularly the part where the boy and the elf first met. Loana, almost absent-mindedly, recited an entire sentence from the story, describing the boy's emotions during that fateful meeting. Maria, astonished, decided to test her further. Page by page, Maria asked Loana to recall specific sections of the story. To her amazement, Loana repeated each part with perfect accuracy, as if the words had been etched into her memory. Maria marveled at how Loana, having skimmed the story only once, had retained it so completely. This level of recall, Maria thought, was far beyond ordinary, prompting her to consider inviting a tutor to formally educate Loana. Their conversation shifted when Loana inquired if the kingdom described in the story was real. Maria confirmed that it was the Tauriun kingdom, a desert nation built around a vast oasis. She showed Loana an illustration of the kingdom's capital, pointing out the grand palace at its center. The location, Maria explained, was chosen because of the oasis that sustained the entire region. As Loana studied the image, a strange sensation overcame her. Her eyes widened, and she felt an inexplicable connection to the place. She wondered if she had ever dreamt of it before, or if it was a memory buried deep within her. In another part of the palace, a seal was seen reprimanding Adam over the gifts he had prepared for Loana. She reminded him that he had been warned not to give inappropriate presents. Adam explained that Loana had not seen the gifts because Maria had taken them away. After some time, a seal sat down and began questioning Adam about Loana's character. She mentioned that Loana seemed highly regarded by both the Crown Prince and Maria and expressed her desire to meet her. Adam responded that he could request permission from the Crown Prince, suggesting that Loana might soon have more free time after her maid and bodyguard were appointed. Asil questioned why Maria seemed to handle so many responsibilities on her own, asking why the existing maids weren't involved. Adam replied that the situation was complicated and difficult to explain. Their conversation took a darker turn when Asil, unable to contain her frustration, began cursing Liliana. Adam attempted to calm her, but Asil expressed her anger, blaming Liliana for their father's death. She remarked that although all evidence pointed to Liliana as the culprit, her guilt could not be proven, allowing her to roam freely without consequence. Adam reminded Asil that Luana should not be blamed for any of this. Asil agreed, adding that this was why she had chosen to give Luana a teddy bear as a gift. Suddenly, Asil clutched her head and sat down, clearly in pain. Adam, concerned, asked if she was all right. Asil assured him it was nothing serious, though she admitted she hadn't felt this way in a long time. Shifting the subject, she resolved to find a maid for Luana from a noble family. Adam promised to relay the information carefully when he next saw Luana. The events began to unfold in the imperial palace, where Adam, a loyal aide, approached Crown Prince to discuss a matter of importance. A question was posed to the prince, seeking his opinion on whether a particular plan could be executed. The prince, after reflecting, expressed that it might be better for Asil to handle the matter of maids rather than himself. As the conversation shifted, the prince inquired about Asil's health. He was informed by Adam that her condition had remained stagnant since the day she had fainted in the imperial palace. Although numerous doctors had assured them there was no underlying issue, her recovery was incomplete. Adam added that while she had improved slightly, her overall state had not returned to normal. Frustration was evident as the prince pointed out that both medics and physicians had failed to identify the root cause of her condition. Determined to offer some solace, the prince decided that Asil should be visited, along with Luana, the female protagonist. This gesture, Adam commented with a smile, would certainly bring joy to Asil. However, Adam hesitated before voicing his concern about Luana being taken outside the palace. The previous involvement of Liliana, a woman whose name was marred by an attempted assassination accusation years prior, was mentioned. While Adam's apprehension was acknowledged, the prince reassured him that Liliana posed no real threat. She had become a topic of idle gossip within the palace, and any bold move from her was deemed unlikely. Despite this, the prince admitted to being troubled by the expression Liliana might have shown when her plans had failed, particularly because Luana had been placed under the Empress's protection. To allay concerns, the prince assured Adam that Luana would be provided with additional security, making it unnecessary to worry further. Their discussion was interrupted when a maid entered the room and announced that the queen had requested the prince's presence. When the prince arrived at his mother's quarters, he was informed about a proposal made by Duke Esteban. The Empress, with her characteristic poise, mentioned that the Duke had suggested an arrangement involving Luana, given that his son was close in age to her. While listening to this, the prince became visibly displeased. His suspicions grew as he contemplated the Duke's true intentions. It was believed by the prince that Esteban cared less about Luana and more about using his son to gain favor for his family. As the Empress sipped her tea, a playful remark was directed at her son, suggesting that jealousy might be clouding his judgment. Turning to her attendant Emma, she asked if such tendencies had been noticed in him since childhood. Emma, with a knowing smile, agreed. The prince, unbothered by their teasing, stated firmly that others were free to interpret his actions as they wished. The Empress, however, cautioned her son that Luana could not be kept in his palace indefinitely. It was proposed by her that Luana could be moved to Gloria Palace, a magnificent estate constructed from pristine white marble. This palace, situated between the Empress's quarters and the prince's residence, was a place of honor, often regarded as a symbol of the Empress's affection. The prince, skeptical of his mother's intentions, asked for clarification. The Empress assured him that her motives were purely protective and that Luana would find happiness in such a space. Despite her reassurances, the prince remained guarded and decided to deliberate further on the matter. Meanwhile, Luana experienced a peculiar dream. She found herself surrounded by darkness and became aware of a sweet taste lingering in her mouth. It was wondered by her whether this could be the dessert she had been craving. Suddenly, a figure appeared before her and asked whether she was satisfied. Startled, she tried to identify the presence, but it vanished before she could respond. Awakened abruptly, she found Maria, her loyal friend, standing beside her bed. Maria, noticing her distressed state, remarked that it must have been a nightmare. Seeking comfort, Luana embraced Maria tightly. Elsewhere, in the residence of Duke Esteban, an intriguing exchange occurred between the Duke and his wife. A letter sent by Crown Prince was handed to the Duchess. It was revealed by the Duke that their son, Karan, had been forging a connection with Lawana. The Duchess, astonished by this information, questioned the appropriateness of sharing such royal matters so openly. Her concerns were dismissed by the Duke, who was evidently delighted by the prospect of his family's increased influence. The Duchess remarked that Lawana's visit to the Queen's palace signified the Empress's growing role as her protector. Together, the couple discussed how this development could be used to their advantage. Meanwhile, outside the Duke's residence, Karan was seated quietly when a sudden sneeze escaped him. He muttered to himself, speculating that he might have been mentioned in someone's conversation. A strange unease settled over him, leaving him to ponder the significance of this unexpected feeling. Lawana had finished reading all the books Maria had brought her. Turning to Maria, she inquired if there were more books available. Maria had gently informed her that for now, these were all she had brought, but she promised to bring more next time. To lift Lawana's spirits, Maria suggested they visit the garden, adding that the pleasant weather would make it an enjoyable experience. Hearing about the garden sparked Lawana's curiosity, and as they stepped outside, her eyes lit up with wonder. She expressed her delight, calling the garden beautiful. Maria, observing Lawana's awe, asked if she truly liked it. Lawana admitted that it was her first time seeing a garden, explaining how her mother, Liliana, had always kept her locked in her room. Though Lawana was overjoyed, Maria couldn't help but feel troubled. It's just a flower garden, Maria thought. Why would Liliana deprive her daughter of this simple pleasure? Overcome with emotion, Maria embraced Lawana and softly murmured that Liliana, despite giving birth to her, had not acted as a parent. Noticing Maria's tears, Lawana grew concerned. She assured Maria that everything would be fine and gently urged her not to cry. Maria, wiping her tears, revealed that her own mother had passed away shortly after her birth. Despite this, her father had worked tirelessly to fill the void left by her mother. She explained that he had been a knight in the royal family and had died on a mission, but she remained proud of him until the very end. As they spoke, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden. Lawana's mind wandered back to her mother, Liliana. Why doesn't she ever express what she truly means? She thought. At the same time, she couldn't bring herself to ask Maria the questions swirling in her mind. She felt that the love Maria and others had shown her was enough. Meanwhile, at a distance, the prince and Adam watched the two women in silence, having overheard parts of their conversation. The prince reflected aloud, noting how the sacrifices of people like Maria's father and Adam's father had shaped their lives. Adam assured him, as he always did, that neither he nor Maria harbored resentment toward the prince. The prince, however, found himself burdened by lingering guilt and anger toward Liliana. Deciding it was not the right moment to interrupt, he told Adam they would approach them later. Back in the garden, Maria and Lawana continued to enjoy their time together. Maria asked if Lawana liked the flowers, to which Lawana enthusiastically replied that they were beautiful and sparkling. They began crafting small gifts for each other from the flowers. Maria fashioned a delicate wreath for Lawana, while Lawana, after a few attempts, managed to create a small ring from the flowers for Maria. When they exchanged their creations, Maria accepted Lawana's gift with heartfelt gratitude, promising to cherish it forever. Later, Lawana sat inside the palace, still wearing the wreath Maria had made. The prince and Adam approached her, curious about the wreath. Lawana explained that Maria had made it for her, and Maria added that Lawana had gifted her a flower ring in return. Adam, smiling brightly, asked if Lawana could make something for him next time. Lawana cheerfully replied that she would craft matching rings for him and Maria, an idea that left both Maria and Adam momentarily stunned. However, Lawana soon noticed the prince's expression had darkened. Worried, she asked if he was upset because she had picked the flowers, promising to be more careful in the future. The prince shook his head, assuring her that he wasn't angry about something so trivial. Instead, he revealed that there was something he needed to discuss. Something about her old palace. Lawana froze. Panic surged through her as she struggled to process his words. The palace I escaped from? Why would he bring that up now? Is he planning to send me back there? It was made clear to her by the crown prince that there was another arrangement being considered for her. However, the explanation left her feeling unsettled. Loana, unable to suppress her emotions, expressed her fears. She had insisted that she didn't want to leave, reminding the prince that she had been told this was her room and that she had been permitted to remain here. Her voice trembled as she asked whether her mother's reputation had caused her to fall out of favor. She begged for reassurance, emphasizing that she would not cause any trouble and that moving to the princess's palace was out of the question for her. The crown prince had immediately recognized that Loana's concerns were rooted in a misunderstanding. She had assumed he was referring to the princess's palace, a place she felt unworthy of and associated with the royal family's history. He had gently clarified that his suggestion was not related to the palace she feared. With a calm tone, he had tried to ease her anxieties, asking her to listen carefully. It had been explained to her that the place being offered was Gloria Palace. His words had been accompanied by a reassuring gesture as his hand was placed gently on her head. The name of the palace had been spoken softly, and Loana had been asked if she had ever heard of it. Loana had responded hesitantly, asking if it was the palace built entirely of white marble, as she had heard in rumors. This had been confirmed by the prince, who further explained that if she liked the palace, it could be made available to her. The idea had left her in disbelief. Memories of her mother, Liliana, cursing the queen and the palace surfaced in her mind. It had been a place associated with the queen's late biological daughter, the princess who had passed away, and Loana had always thought of it as a sacred, untouchable space. As these thoughts weighed on her, she had begun to question whether she, an outsider in her own family, could ever belong to such a place. The notion seemed inconceivable to her. While the prince observed her hesitation, he had reassured her further. She was told that there was no need to overthink the matter, and that the palace was unoccupied and well-maintained, making it an ideal choice. Loana had been reminded that if she did not like it, they could explore other options. It was suggested that they visit Gloria Palace together so that she could make an informed decision. Reluctantly, Loana had agreed. As they departed for the palace, the prince had informed her that she would soon be introduced to a friend of his. This announcement had caught her off guard, and she had hesitated, asking if such an introduction was truly necessary. The prince had reassured her, stating that there was no obligation for her to meet anyone if she was uncomfortable. However, he had emphasized that he hoped she would be open to the idea. Loana, still unsure, had expressed her concern that the other person might not approve of her. The prince's expression had hardened at this, and he had made it clear that anyone who dared to insult her would face consequences. She had been instructed to inform him of such incidents immediately, and his words had left no room for argument. When they finally arrived at Gloria Palace, Loana had been captivated by its beauty. The grand structure, with its gleaming white marble and intricate design, seemed almost unreal to her. They had stood before a magnificent fountain at the palace's center, and Loana had timidly asked if it was truly possible for her to live there. The prince had assured her that it was entirely her choice, and he had asked if the palace was to her liking. Loana, overwhelmed, had expressed her approval and gratitude. The prince had then made a bold promise, stating that if there was anything about the palace she disliked, it would be demolished and rebuilt according to her preferences. Loana had protested, saying that the palace was far too beautiful to alter. However, the prince had insisted that her comfort and happiness were more important than the palace itself. As they explored the grounds, Maria, one of the palace attendants, had arrived to finalize preparations. She had suggested that they take some time to look around. Loana had been particularly drawn to the fountain and had moved closer to admire it. Maria had attempted to stop her, cautioning that the fountain was not yet complete. Despite the warning, Loana had reached out and dipped her hands into the water. The coldness of the water had startled her at first, but she had soon found it soothing and comforting. Both the prince and Maria had watched her in silence, their expressions shifting to one of disbelief as something extraordinary unfolded. The fountain, which had appeared still and unfinished, had begun to shimmer with life. The once dormant structure seemed to awaken, its beauty enhanced in a way that neither the prince nor Maria could have anticipated. The prince explained to Maria the nature of spirits, mentioning that even among the elves, only one individual could form a contract with a spirit. Occasionally, humans were known to become summoners, but it was a rare phenomenon. He stated that the reason Arias, Maria's mother, could not ascend as an emperor among the princesses was due to the unique ability required to control spiritual power. The prince wondered aloud if the ability could belong to Luana, the female protagonist. He inquired if Luana possessed any impairments as a kin. When Maria replied negatively, the prince reflected that some kins, born with ancestral blood, often match the mood of their powers rather than mastering them outright. Maria commented that they were fortunate no one was nearby to overhear them. The prince remarked that more people would need to be carefully selected for their task and instructed Maria to cease idle chatter and unnecessary wandering. Maria obediently agreed. The prince then remarked that if Luana learned to handle her powers properly, she would gain the strength to protect herself. However, as they discussed this, Luana stumbled and fell into the fountain. The prince and Maria quickly pulled her out. Luana smiled sheepishly, and the prince reminded her to exercise caution near water. He ordered Maria to escort Luana inside and fetch her dry clothes. Luana hesitated, asking if they were not returning to the crown prince's palace. The prince replied that their current location was chosen for its favorable environment. Maria noted that the Gloria Palace was designed to maintain a constant temperature. Luana began sneezing, prompting the prince to wrap his coat around her. Maria understood the urgency and left quickly to bring clothes, taking Adam along as instructed by the prince. The prince pondered silently, suspecting that Luana's abilities as a summoner might be manifesting. He recalled similar symptoms in a seal who had fallen ill years ago. When Luana asked where they were going, the prince replied that they were heading to the bedroom. Luana wondered to herself if this palace might become her home and reflected on the bitter sweetness of leaving her brother behind. Upon entering the grand bedroom, Luana was left awestruck by its magnificence. She hesitantly asked if it was truly just a room. The prince, observing her reaction, inquired if she liked it and suggested building another elsewhere if needed. Luana replied that she liked it, but lamented that living here would mean seeing him less frequently. The prince reassured her, explaining that they would still be in the same palace and that she could visit or stay whenever she wanted. Placing his hand on her head, he added that he would not be moving in immediately as preparations would take months. When Adam returned to the palace, the prince asked if he had heard anything on the way. Adam assumed the prince referred to the spirits. The prince remarked that if Luana was a summoner, it would be manageable. However, he expressed concern that no updates had been received from the nanny, who was secretive. He further shared a troubling memory about goblins that had been cursed a few years prior, overhearing a man speculating about a mediator. The prince suspected a connection between the curses and a seal's condition. Handing Adam his badge, the prince instructed him to locate medics and ancient records. Adam was also ordered to search for anyone displaying symptoms similar to a seal's, regardless of their location, and to consult all available documents and legends. Adam acknowledged the orders and left immediately. The prince grew increasingly anxious, fearing that a seal's condition might not be an illness, but a curse. He wondered if Luana too might be at risk and resolved to seek out his mother for answers. Meanwhile, in another part of the empire, the empress held a conversation with Emma about Asil's health. Emma reported improvement but hesitated to continue. The empress, anticipating her concerns, reminded her that without evidence, accusations could not be made. She admitted to years of investigation without clarity, but emphasized that baseless suspicion or harsh actions were equally unacceptable. Despite her personal ties, she acknowledged the delicate balance of power that should not be tampered with and resolved to investigate further. Back at Gloria Palace, Luana, now dry and sitting with the prince, asked if Adam had left. The prince confirmed that he had. As they conversed, the prince noticed that Luana's dress looked familiar and remarked on it. Luana explained that she liked it because it was pretty, not because of financial constraints. Maria interjected, commenting on the prince's outfit and remarking that he rarely wore varied clothing. She suggested he experiment with styles to avoid confusion. The prince brushed off the comment, but instructed Maria to call all designers in the empire under the royal family's name to address the clothing issue. Under the prince's command, an order was issued in the name of the royal family to summon all the empire's designers. Maria and Luana, the female protagonist, were left stunned by this declaration. Maria hesitantly inquired if such authority could bypass the usual need for advance bookings. She was informed that indeed it could. The prince calmly acknowledged that such privileges came with his station, though he had never used them for personal gain before. Maria, her excitement bubbling over, sought permission to exercise the full extent of Lord Ludian's authority in carrying out the order. The prince wryly asked if she wished for the royal seal to be included, to which Maria eagerly agreed, reasoning that it would expedite matters. She then turned to Luana and joyfully announced that a collection of new clothes awaited her, before hurrying out of the room, declaring that work awaited her. Later, Luana was approached by the royal parents, who gently inquired if the palace was to her liking. She expressed her delight, silently marveling at how superior this palace was compared to her old one. Her thoughts were interrupted by the prince, who reassured her that this was now her home. His satisfaction was evident, knowing that Luana appreciated the grandeur surrounding her. While Luana spent her afternoon immersed in books, Maria returned with a suggestion. She proposed that instead of continuing to study independently, Luana should consider attending lectures at the Royal Academy. Maria assured her that a professor specializing in her interests could provide invaluable insights. Though Maria emphasized it was not an imposition, she believed Luana's love for reading could flourish further under expert guidance. Luana, however, hesitated. The mention of teachers and learning evoked an inexplicable unease within her. Memories from dreams she could not fully recall resurfaced, leaving her anxious. It felt as though something important lingered just out of reach, suffocating her with its vagueness. Unable to confront these emotions, she replied that she would consider the suggestion later. Later, Maria approached the prince with her observations about Luana's exceptional aptitude for learning. She noted how Luana could memorize entire texts after a single reading, and suggested that a teacher might further cultivate her abilities. The prince, however, gave Maria a piercing look and countered her suggestion. He surmised that Maria might be concerned about Luana's noble lineage being scrutinized by others. Firmly, he reminded Maria that Luana was a princess, not someone who needed to prove herself to lesser nobles. His tone softened as he advised Maria not to impose societal expectations on Luana, emphasizing that she should grow at her own pace. Maria, chastened, apologized and vowed to remember this lesson. Yet as she stood there, her thoughts lingered on whether she had unknowingly underestimated Luana. This realization weighed heavily on her, filling her with guilt. Their conversation was interrupted by Adam's sudden arrival. He greeted Maria, though she remained lost in her thoughts. The prince, redirecting the discussion, inquired about the progress of Luana's new wardrobe. Maria assured him that the dresses would arrive the following day, as all the capital's shops had received instructions. Meanwhile, the capital's markets buzzed with frantic activity. Word of the royal decree spread, throwing designers and seamstresses into a flurry of action. One shop owner, overseeing her team, ordered the cancellation of pre-existing commitments to focus entirely on the princess's wardrobe. Disgruntled workers questioned the abrupt shift, lamenting the effort already invested in other orders. Holding up an official document bearing the royal seal, the shop owner silenced their complaints. The order, issued by the crown prince, demanded nothing less than perfection. Realizing this was an opportunity of a lifetime, the team sprang into action, repurposing designs to suit a child's size. Amidst the chaos, a woman in a yellow dress studied the royal decree with trembling hands. She whispered to herself about the significance of this moment, imagining the possibility of the princess donning one of her creations. If that happened, she believed, her designs would gain unparalleled prestige. This thought filled her with determination as she envisioned her dreams taking shape through the threads of royal fabric. As the prince stepped into the room, he immediately noticed Luana seated alongside his mother, the empress. The sight brought a hint of surprise to his face. Curious and slightly irritated, the prince asked why his mother had chosen to be there. In response, the empress calmly but firmly pointed out that he couldn't possibly have been planning to choose the dresses himself. With a faintly amused expression, she added that his knowledge of women's clothing was likely limited. This remark seemed to ignite a spark of annoyance in him. His gaze shifted to Maria, and he demanded an explanation for the situation. Maria quickly defended herself, explaining that she had issued strict commands and was unaware of the current turn of events. Her expression betrayed genuine confusion. Turning next to Adam, the prince sought further clarification. Adam, however, seemed equally baffled. He admitted that he had been in the middle of a conversation with a seal when the Empress had entered the scene, leaving him unaware of her intentions. The prince silently considered the possibility that this gathering had been organized discreetly to avoid unnecessary disruption. However, he hadn't expected his mother to appear so suddenly. As he mulled over the situation, his attention was drawn to Loana, who appeared utterly unbothered. She was casually eating something, her demeanor calm and indifferent. This sight stirred an unspoken irritation within him, coupled with a flicker of jealousy that was impossible for him to conceal. Maria, noticing the change in his expression, couldn't help but comment on it, humorously suggesting that he might be feeling jealous. The playful remark broke the tension for a moment, and Maria turned to the Empress to confirm whether it was time to summon the others. With a nod of approval, the Empress gave the instruction for everyone to be brought in, ensuring they entered in an orderly manner. A procession of women entered the room, each adorned in elegant attire that caught everyone's attention. Loana, in particular, seemed captivated by the display. The prince seated himself beside her and the Empress as the presentations commenced. The first dress, a striking blue one, was introduced as the most sophisticated in the collection. Loana's gaze was drawn to it almost instantly, her admiration evident. However, her attention wavered as she noticed a group of children standing quietly in line nearby. Their presence puzzled her, and she hesitantly inquired about their role. The prince explained that the children were there to model the dresses, so everyone could see how they looked when worn. The Empress, adding to the explanation, informed Loana that if a dress didn't meet her expectations, she should feel free to express her opinion openly. Loana initially found the arrangement odd, but soon understood that the children were meant to model the dresses instead of her. As the first child stepped forward wearing the blue dress, the Empress turned to Loana for her thoughts. Loana, entranced by the beauty of the garment, expressed her approval without hesitation. The prince, however, seemed unimpressed by her quick response and suggested that she should examine the dress more closely before forming an opinion. Noticing Loana's hesitation, the Empress gently asked if she was feeling uncomfortable. Loana, attempting to reassure her, replied that it wasn't discomfort, but rather the novelty of the situation that had caught her off guard. Internally, however, she reflected on how she had felt awkward at first, but was slowly beginning to relax. The Empress offered words of encouragement, urging her not to worry and to enjoy the moment. The children and women in the room continued to look expectantly at Loana, making her feel slightly self-conscious. In an attempt to redirect their attention, she pointed to another dress she liked. A woman with striking pink hair, later introduced as Velia Osfara, stepped forward to present the chosen garment. Velia explained with pride that the dress, while simple in design, was embellished with jewels that sparkled brilliantly when touched by light. The prince, agreeing with Vilia's description, remarked that the dress exuded a certain elegance. Loana nodded in agreement, and when the dress was modeled by a child, it became clear that the design was truly stunning. Impressed by the craftsmanship, the prince asked Velia for her name. She responded with grace, adding that the dress had been created with Loana's comfort in mind. However, this display of confidence drew disapproving glares from another designer, who appeared visibly upset. It seemed that Velia had disrupted the order in which the dresses were supposed to be presented, causing quiet tension to ripple through the room. Despite the unspoken rivalry, Velia remained composed, her focus unwavering. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, a maid knelt before Liliana, nervously recounting everything that had transpired. Liliana was furious when she discovered that all the designers had gathered at the Crown Prince's palace. Her anger was directed at a trembling maid who was accused of being part of the insult. Liliana demanded to know how they could dare to ignore her. The maid, gripped by fear, could only stand silently, trembling as Liliana's frustration poured out. It was also stated by Liliana that the female protagonist, Loana, seemed to be clinging desperately to the attention of the palace. As Liliana's eyes fell on the maid's hands, she noticed a faint scar. Her demeanor changed abruptly, and she knelt to examine the injury. The question of whether Jane, the maid, had been hurt was voiced by her with a semblance of concern. Jane, though still nervous, replied with gratitude for the concern, but it was clear she wished to avoid further attention. Rising gracefully, Liliana commented that a kind and thoughtful image would be needed if the prince was to be won over. It was implied by her that Jane, along with others, might share in her success if everything went according to plan. Despite Liliana's shift in tone, the maid remained uneasy, her thoughts clouded with fear and doubt. Memories of the screams from the basement haunted her. Those screams, Liliana reflected aloud, had not been easy to forget. They echoed in her mind, but she justified her actions to herself, claiming that no one had ever extended a hand to her family during their darkest times. She resolved that survival, even if achieved alone, was all that mattered. Meanwhile, at the Crown Prince's palace, Loana was occupied with overseeing the work of the designers. Orders were issued by her regarding colors and ribbons she disliked, and adjustments to the dresses were demanded constantly. Initially, this process had been enjoyable for her, but as the hours passed, exhaustion began to take its toll. Her legs, unaccustomed to such prolonged sitting, ached in protest and her patience wore thin. The Crown Prince, noticing Loana's fatigue, quietly brought it to the Empress's attention. It was suggested by the Empress that a break should be taken, and she announced to the designers that those without additional pieces to display could leave. However, many of the designers insisted that more dresses could still be presented if needed. Vilja, one of the designers, observed the scene closely. It was noticed by her that the other designers were trying to discern the Queen's preferences, even though the event's purpose was clearly to please Loana. The realization struck Vilja that while the Queen had organized the gathering, the true goal was to win the favor of the princess. Loana, feeling overwhelmed, informed her maid, Maria, of her desire to step outside for some fresh air. As they walked out, it was mentioned by Loana how draining the entire ordeal had become. Maria remarked that Loana had seemed enthusiastic earlier, to which Loana admitted that her initial excitement had indeed faded. Maria suggested that Loana rest in the garden while she fetched some snacks to lift her spirits. Loana made her way to the garden, reflecting on the Queen's seemingly boundless energy and resilience. It was wondered by her how the Queen could endure such an exhausting event without showing signs of fatigue. As Loana walked through the quiet garden, an unusual silence surrounded her, and she sensed the presence of someone nearby. Turning around, Loana was startled by the sight of a woman being pinned to the ground by a royal knight. The knight, upon noticing Loana, quickly introduced himself as Selbin Arsian. Apologies were made by him for the disturbance, and it was explained that he had only recently returned to the palace. Selbin's name was familiar to Loana, as stories about him had circulated in the palace. It had often been said that he was a charming knight, praised frequently by the women in the court. Her attention, however, shifted to the restrained woman, and a demand was made by Loana to know who the intruder was and why she was there. The woman, pleading for mercy, explained through tears that her only intention had been to collect a rare flower her late mother had loved. The flower, it was explained by Selbin, was an elf's gift and could only be found within the palace grounds. He expressed skepticism, suggesting that a commoner like the woman could not have known about its existence. The woman, insisting on her innocence, was overcome with tears, and her sincerity was sensed by Loana. An order was given by Loana for the woman to be released. Although objections were raised by Selvin, who reminded Loana that the woman had attempted to steal royal property, Loana insisted that the woman's intentions seemed genuine. When asked for her name, the woman introduced herself as Jessie, a servant working at Madame Belle's palace. Loana, moved by Jessie's story, decided to retrieve the flower herself. It was presented by Loana to Jessie as an apology for the harsh treatment she had received. Selvin, however, continued to voice concerns, warning Luana that allowing the woman to go unpunished could lead to trouble. Luana dismissed these concerns, asserting that it was her choice to give away the flower. Jessie was told that she could leave, and a request was made by Luana to Selvin that the incident remain a secret between them. Luana, now more visibly tired than before, looked to the sky and sighed, longing for the day to end. Selvin returned to the palace, sensing an unusual change in the atmosphere. He speculated that something significant must have occurred in the capital while he had been away tending to matters in his territory. Even the knight commander, whom he encountered upon his arrival, addressed him as disciple. When Selvin reminded the commander that he was no longer part of the Imperial Division, the latter admitted that he had been too preoccupied to process Selvin's resignation. This left Selvin puzzled as he made his way to the Crown Prince's residence. Upon entering, his gaze fell on a young woman who carried herself with grace and authority. It became evident to him that she was none other than Her Royal Highness, Princess Luana. Politely, Selvin informed her that he would prefer being addressed simply as Selvin. Inwardly, Selvin reflected on the rumors he had heard, that the Empress had been caring for Liliana's daughter. Despite her lineage, the princess's actions surprised him. He had expected hostility, yet instead, Luana extended kindness to a woman in her presence by offering her flowers. Selvin, though astonished, remained skeptical, wondering if appearances might be deceptive. Maria entered the room shortly after and was startled to see Selvin. She demanded to know what he was doing there, reminding him that he had relinquished his position as a knight. Selvin began explaining his circumstances, but Maria cut him off and introduced him to the princess, revealing that he was none other than Selvin Arison, heir to Duke Arison. Luana was taken aback. In her thoughts, she mused that she had underestimated him. He was far more significant than she had imagined. Maria, turning back to Selvin, teased him, suggesting that he might be working in secret. Before Selvin could clarify, Luana interjected, stating that their meeting had been by chance, and dismissed further probing. Instead, she invited both Maria and Selvin to join her for tea. As they sat together, Selvin spoke of his northern territory, describing how it transformed into a vast, snowy expanse during winter. Luana, intrigued, listened intently. Selvin shared that walking across untouched snow, leaving footprints on pristine land, was one of his favorite pastimes. Maria offered Luana more tea, and the princess accepted, clearly enjoying the conversation. Noticing Selvin's frequent glances at Maria, Luana deduced his feelings. Selvin hesitantly extended an invitation to both women, proposing they visit his territory someday. When Luana asked if she could truly come, Selvin reassured her that she would be most welcome. Their peaceful tea time was interrupted by the Crown Prince's sudden entrance. Selvin quickly stood and bowed in respect. The prince eyed him coldly and inquired why he was present, remarking that Selvin had supposedly retired. Selvin explained that he had stepped down to inherit his family's legacy. The prince, however, accused him of impersonating an imperial knight, pointing out that leaving without formal approval was a violation. Selvin explained that his resignation had not been processed and added that he had only come to the palace after hearing the prince sought this baby. The prince dismissed the excuse, claiming that the request had been cancelled. He reprimanded Selvin for not arriving sooner when initially summoned. Without further argument, the prince abruptly picked up Luana in his arms and declared that Selvin could wait if he was so eager for work. He then departed, leaving Selvin behind. As they walked away, Luana questioned the prince. She asked if Selvin had feelings for Maria. The prince confirmed it, adding that although Selvin denied it, Maria was unaware of his affection. Luana remarked that Maria deserved better than someone like Selvin. Later, Selvin visited the prince in private, seeking clarity. He asked why the prince had been searching for that kid. The prince, irritated, told Selvin to calm down and demanded information about Karan Esteban. When Selvin referred to Karan by a nickname, Adam, another knight who entered the room, teased him, suggesting that he must know Karen well. The prince pressed further, asking Selvin about Karen's character. Selvin explained that Karen, only 9 years old, was his stepbrother. He insisted that a child of that age would have no romantic entanglements, yet the prince revealed that Karan had given an expensive bracelet to an 8-year-old girl he had just met. Selvin chuckled, calling it innocent love, but the prince was far from amused. He expressed concern, feeling the situation was inappropriate. He revealed that Karen had become friends with Lawana and had gained access to the palace. Unwilling to take any risks, the prince instructed Selvin to keep a close eye on Karen and report anything suspicious. Meanwhile, in another part of the capital, Karen's father informed him that he had permission to visit the crown prince's residence to see Princess Lawana. Lawana stood in the hall, curiosity flickering in her eyes as she asked the prince who they were expecting. The prince replied that it was someone she need not worry about. This only made Lawana more anxious, and she pointed out that if someone was coming to meet her, it was impossible not to feel nervous. The prince, with a dismissive wave, suggested that she simply ignore the visitor. Lawana was left perplexed, unsure of what to make of his cryptic attitude. Inwardly, she was relieved that the new clothes had finally arrived, even though she felt no particular need to wear them. Watching the prince's strange behavior, she firmly asked him to stop acting so oddly. He turned away, conceding with a soft, "All right." The prince's thoughts drifted to a conversation with Duke Esteban. The Duke had once remarked, "When you think you have a good personality, you're too old. And when you're of the right age, your personality isn't the best anymore." Reflecting on this, the prince mused that perhaps the nobles needed re-education. How could their upbringing produce such unworthy heirs? Turning to Lawana, he quipped that if the visitor acted insolently, she ought to kick him. Adam and the others, overhearing this, exchanged nervous glances, silently hoping no trouble would arise. Meanwhile, Duke Esteban and his son Karan arrived at the prince's palace. Karan, puzzled, asked his father why they were there. The Duke explained that the princess was currently under the prince's care and it was a matter worth witnessing. Karan seemed taken aback, but followed his father. Maria greeted them and led the way to the chamber. Opening the door, she gestured toward the prince and Lawana, saying, "There he is." The Duke entered, smiling warmly, and greeted the prince. The prince, with a polite but restrained tone, asked if the visit was truly necessary. The Duke responded cheerfully, explaining that he had come to introduce his son. Bowing slightly, he declared, "This is Karan Esteban, my son. Though he may be lacking, I hope your highness will find him agreeable." The prince nodded, asking Karan to make his introductions. Karan, visibly uneasy, noticed a bracelet on Lawana's wrist. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He remembered giving such a bracelet to someone long ago. His mind raced, concluding that Lawana must have stolen it. Despite his growing irritation, he introduced himself formally, addressing Lawana as the princess and expressing his intention to work well with her. Lawana, observing him closely, felt a strange familiarity. She pondered where she might have seen him before but couldn't quite place it. Meanwhile, the prince studied Karan's demeanor. Sensing his displeasure, the prince leaned toward Lawana and quietly reminded her of his earlier advice. Lawana, though puzzled, recalled it with growing clarity. Just then, a servant approached the prince and apologized for an interruption, requesting his presence outside. The Duke seized the moment to excuse himself as well, instructing Karan to enjoy his time. As they walked through the corridor, the Duke remarked, "Judging by the reaction, your highness already knows. My son must have given the bracelet to her." The prince, his expression unreadable, replied that the Duke was likely aware of this long before. He assured him that no reckless rumors would spread, except perhaps from the Duke himself. The Duke chuckled, feigning ignorance. The prince, his tone serious, added that trust was a delicate matter. Not everyone could be relied upon, particularly in such precarious situations. The Duke countered, arguing that such concerns were universal, not limited to adults. Children, too, absorbed their parents' words, and he worried these dynamics could inadvertently harm Lawana. The prince dismissed his concerns lightly, asserting that, at the very least, Karan wouldn't say anything damaging in front of others. The Duke, his gaze thoughtful, suggested that perhaps his son had taken a liking to Lawana. The prince scoffed at the notion, pointing out that Karan had failed to recognize her. The Duke, shifting the subject, commented that the prince seemed deeply protective of Lawana. The prince, smiling faintly, admitted this was true, even surprising himself at times. Watching him, the Duke reflected on the boy's growth. At just 8 years old, the prince had lost all those he loved, yet he had matured quickly, now seeking to protect others. The Duke voiced his thoughts aloud, noting that the prince's path would undoubtedly be a difficult one. The prince replied that he too had once thought so. However, before he could hesitate, there had been those who pushed him forward. As the conversation shifted to lighter matters, the Duke's mind wandered to the maid he had seen earlier. She claimed to be the daughter of a former guard of the late Crown Prince. Quietly, he questioned if he could ever truly accept the child of someone he once considered a traitor. But as he thought of the Empire's future, he concluded it was bright and full of promise. Finally, the Duke remarked, "Karan and the princess must be enjoying themselves." The prince, with a hint of mischief, responded, "That remains to be seen." A few hours earlier, Lawana and Karan had found themselves standing silently in the grand hallway, their tension palpable. Maria, ever observant, had been watching them closely, noting the unspoken animosity between the two. Breaking the silence, Maria had addressed Lawana with a polite inquiry, suggesting that a seat could be prepared for her in the garden. Lawana had agreed with a warm smile, and Maria, ever diligent, had added that cocoa could also be served if desired. Lawana, with a hint of playfulness, had expressed her approval. Turning to Karan, Maria had politely asked if he had any specific requests. His response had been indifferent, stating that he held no particular preferences and that the drink should not be overly sweet. Though his words had seemed neutral, Lawana had felt an underlying sarcasm and wondered if she was being mocked. Since their first interaction, she had been unable to shake the feeling that he harbored some sort of grudge against her. What puzzled her most was that she could not recall having done anything to provoke him. Maria, sensing the unease between the two, had intended to say something, but Lawana had interrupted, suggesting they would head to the garden ahead of her and that Maria could take her time with the preparations. Maria had sought confirmation, but Lawana had reassured her with a smile, gently nudging her to attend to her tasks. As Lawana and Karan strolled through the garden, surrounded by the serenity of blooming flowers, the atmosphere between them had remained strained. Lawana had eventually stopped and turned to Karan, unable to hold back her thoughts any longer. With quiet determination, she had asked why his gaze toward her was so critical. Karan, unmoved by the question, had coldly remarked that her manner of dealing with others appeared arrogant and dismissive. Lawana, taken aback, had defended herself by pointing out that it was Karan who had displayed hostility first. Karan, maintaining his composed demeanor, had countered by accusing her of showing no remorse for her mistakes. He had further remarked that, as the princess, she seemed consumed by her own sense of privilege. Lawana, shocked by his words, had demanded to know what wrongs she had committed to warrant such accusations. Karan had revealed that, although they had not met before, her identity as Liliana's daughter, a woman of great significance in the town, was undeniable. Hearing the mention of her late mother's name, Lawana had fallen into silence, her mind spinning with memories and confusion. She had then noticed a crest on Karen's attire, one she recognized immediately. The emblem, along with the delicate flower pattern, had confirmed her suspicion. He was the boy from her past, the one who had gifted her the bracelet. Slowly she had raised her hand, intending to show him the bracelet still adorning her wrist. Karen, however, had misunderstood her gesture. With a firm grip, he had seized her wrist, accusing her of possessing something that did not belong to her. His voice had carried anger as he declared that the bracelet had been intended as a gift for someone else. Lawana, her heart pounding, had been left struggling to comprehend his words. She had silently wondered why he could not recognize her, the very recipient of his gift. As his accusations continued, Lawana had been unable to contain herself. With all the strength she could muster, she had kicked him, forcing him to release her. Karan had staggered backward, startled, just as Maria had entered the garden, her expression filled with alarm. Maria had immediately inquired about Lawana's well-being, her tone laced with concern. Lawana had brushed off the incident, stating that nothing serious had occurred and that she had resolved the matter on her own. Turning back to Karen, Lawana had spoken with cold finality, declaring that she no longer wanted the bracelet and throwing it to the ground. Her voice, filled with a mix of hurt and anger, had carried across the garden as she walked away. In that moment, Karan had been struck by realization. His memories of the past had resurfaced, and it had become clear to him that Lawana was indeed the child to whom he had given the bracelet years ago. Yet it was too late to undo the damage. Lawana, tears streaming down her cheeks, had disappeared from sight, leaving him to grapple with the consequences of his words. Maria, witnessing the scene, had turned to Karen with a stern expression. She had reminded him that such behavior toward the princess was a grave offense, one that could not be taken lightly. Karen, filled with regret, had stood frozen, questioning how events had escalated so quickly. Later that evening, Lawana had confided in Maria, revealing the red marks on her wrist left by Karan's grip. Maria, her voice filled with concern, had apologized, but Lawana had dismissed it, insisting that the matter had already been resolved. Maria had pressed further, asking if she was now protecting Karen despite his behavior. Lawana, her voice tinged with sadness, had explained that the bracelet had been her first gift, but now that it was returned, it no longer held meaning for her. Inwardly, however, Lawana had struggled to suppress her emotions. Despite her attempts to convince herself otherwise, the memory of the bracelet and the boy who had once gifted it lingered in her mind. She had come to realize that she had thought of him as a friend, albeit unknowingly. Meanwhile, Karan, overwhelmed by guilt, had sought out Maria to inquire about Lawana's condition. He had pleaded for the chance to apologize, even if only to hear her voice one last time. Maria, torn between her desire for justice and her recognition of Karan's youthful immaturity, had hesitated. Ultimately, she had decided to grant him this opportunity, instructing him to follow her. Maria had escorted Karan to the door of Lawana's room, where he paused hesitantly, the bracelet gripped tightly in his hand. His frustration was muttered in low tones, words that carried the weight of his discontent. It was being questioned by him why he, of all people, had been kept in ignorance. Even his father had known the truth, yet he had been left in the dark. He blamed himself for failing to grasp the reality of the situation back then, and berated his own foolishness for overlooking what now seemed so obvious. Inside the room, Lawana had overheard the words spilling out of him, and had stepped toward the door, her gaze meeting his. It was being remarked by her that those words were not meant for her, were they? Before he could respond, she began to close the door, but his urgent voice pleaded for it to remain open. An apology was offered by him as he tried to compose himself. It was explained by him that he had spoken informally, though he hoped she would not mind. Gratitude was expressed for the help she had extended earlier, particularly in securing the princess's favor. Despite his appreciation, he acknowledged his regret at displaying his vulnerabilities so openly. In such a state, it was wondered by him how he could even consider making another request. Lawana stepped out of the room, her expression softening. She mused aloud that once again she had found herself reflecting on past choices and repenting. However, it was admitted by her that such acts were no longer necessary. Shifting the topic, she mentioned the snack they had discussed earlier. A suggestion was made that, if they planned to eat it outside, a fresh one could be prepared. Playfully, she added that Maria should ensure something bitter was brought for Karan, who had shown little interest in sweets. Her teasing left Karan standing there in bewilderment, unsure of what to make of the moment. Not long after, the two found themselves seated in the garden, accompanied by a pot of tea. Lawana broke the silence, asking if Karan had anything to share. As he began to reply, a sip of the tea interrupted him. The bitterness hit his tongue, startling him. Internally, it was wondered by him how something that resembled tea could taste so unpleasant, almost medicinal. His bewilderment only grew as he glanced at its murky color. Lawana's amusement was barely concealed as she observed his reaction. A remark was made by her that the tea's bitterness seemed impossible to tolerate, and she suggested he might as well spit it out, if drinking it was unbearable. This suggestion caused Karen to rise abruptly, pacing the garden in visible distress. His attempt to handle the bitter concoction had clearly failed. Watching him, Lawana and Maria could not contain their laughter. It was remarked by Maria that the tea was a particular favorite of Loana's grandfather. This revelation was met with disbelief by Loana, who questioned how anyone could enjoy such a drink. Maria reassured her that tastes often changed with age, though Loana declared vehemently that she would never acquire such a preference. When Karan returned to his seat, he was asked by Loana whether he had recovered, and if he wanted a different drink. With a dry tone, he replied that such a beverage was a disgrace to the concept of tea itself. Loana smiled, deciding to end her teasing. A promise was made by her to keep the incident between them. This was punctuated by a playful gesture as her pinky finger was raised in mock sincerity. Internally, it was resolved by her to refrain from provoking him further, at least for now. Seeking to change the mood, Loana turned to Maria with a curious question. It was asked by her whether letters were usually exchanged between friends. Maria, appearing slightly puzzled, hesitated before responding that she wasn't certain. The inquiry was then redirected to Karan, who explained that he typically spent his free time in sword training. The conversation continued, but Maria's attention had momentarily shifted. Something in the distance had caught her eye, though she said nothing. Meanwhile, Loana, intrigued by Karan's answer, probed further. It was asked by her if he found joy in learning the art of the sword. When his affirmation came, Loana's thoughts turned inward. A realization dawned on her that many of her peers seemed to have something they genuinely enjoyed learning. She envied that sense of purpose, wishing for something similar in her own life. It was admitted by her that no particular activity came to mind when she considered what she might find meaningful. Maria, sensing Loana's mood, interjected with a light-hearted suggestion. It was mentioned by her that a board game, once favored by the prince, could be found in a nearby room. The idea sparked excitement in Loana, who expressed interest in playing. Maria suggested they go ahead, explaining that she needed to retrieve something. Karan and Loana moved toward the room, their hands brushing as they walked. A reminder was called back to Maria not to take too long. As they left, Maria turned to notice Selvin nearby. He was seen restraining a maid, who was trembling in his grip. Gratitude was expressed by Maria for Selvin's quick intervention. With a composed demeanor, she approached the maid. Maria questioned the trembling maid, demanding to know under whose orders she had entered the crown prince's palace. The maid stammered, attempting to explain that she believed no one was present. Selvin, standing nearby, retorted sharply, accusing her of using the palace's emptiness as an excuse. He observed her attire and noted that she appeared to be a maid from the inner court. The maid, desperate, confessed that no one had sent her, claiming she had merely followed Sir Esteban into the palace. Selvin coldly reminded her that the princess was present, regardless of her intentions. The maid gasped in shock, realizing her mistake. She nervously admitted that she had not known the woman beside Sir Esteban was the princess, confessing that her sole intention had been to meet Sir Esteban. At that moment, Enrit, the princess's guard knight, arrived. She confirmed that the maid had been apprehended and informed them that no accomplices had been found. Guards had been summoned, she said, and they needed only to wait. Enrit remarked on the maid's audacity, questioning whether all inner court maids behave so boldly. After inspecting the maid further, Enrit noted that she seemed to belong to the second prince's household. The maid panicked and pleaded for forgiveness, insisting that the prince knew nothing of her actions. She claimed that her loyalty to him had driven her to act impulsively, as the prince had been upset over being unable to meet Sir Esteban. Selvin, furious, demanded she repeat herself, but Maria intervened, reminding everyone that judgment was not their duty. Regardless of her motives, the maid would still face consequences. As Enrit handed handcuffs to Selvin, she dryly commented on his lack of preparedness, earning a sarcastic compliment from Selvin. Their playful exchange ended with Maria assuring them that the Crown Prince's palace guards would handle the situation, allowing Enrit and Selvin to leave. On their way back to the princess, Selvin suggested they walk together, much to Enrit's annoyance. He teased her strict demeanor, even as he munched on food while on duty. Enrit reprimanded him, but Selvin dismissed her complaints, claiming that royal food deserved special treatment. Meanwhile, in the princess's chambers, Loana and Karen examined a map laid out on a game table. Karen identified various locations, pointing out the Empress's palace, the southern waterfall, and Esteban's territory. He explained the northern Duke Arsen's domain and mentioned Tauren, an oasis in the blazing desert. However, he noted that Tauren was reportedly drying up, suggesting the map had been created before the change. Hearing the name Tauren, Lawana felt a faint tug of familiarity, as if the name was tied to a memory. Leaning closer to inspect the map, she was interrupted by Karan, who called her name abruptly. When Lawana turned to him, Karan admitted he had felt a strange fear that she might disappear. He had called her instinctively, though he refrained from explaining further. Their conversation was cut short by Selvin and Enrit's arrival. Lawana asked for Maria, prompting Selvin to jokingly lament his apparent unpopularity. Karan coldly questioned Selvin's presence, recalling that he was supposed to have returned to his territory. Selvin explained that his reassignment as Lawana's escort had brought him back to the palace. Lawana turned her attention to Enrit, who introduced herself humbly, apologizing for her sudden appearance and lack of proper greetings. Lawana reassured her, thinking privately that Enrit's presence felt markedly different from her male escorts. Enrit, noticing Lawana's lingering gaze, nervously asked if her appointment displeased her. Lawana hastily denied this, blurting out a compliment about Enrit's impressive demeanor. Embarrassed, Lawana quickly changed the subject. Karan, shifting the focus, asked Selvin about his supposed resignation from the Imperial Knights. Selvin explained that the paperwork had not been processed by his superior. Lawana inquired about their prior acquaintance, prompting Selvin to recall casual conversations at social gatherings, though Karen dismissed their interactions as superficial. Selvin feigned offense, joking about Karen's harsh treatment. Maria then entered the room carrying a tray of scones. She noted the crowded atmosphere but joined them, sharing her baked treats. As they sat and enjoyed the dessert, the group discussed scones, their toppings, and their flavors. Lawana, trying scones for the first time, was delighted by the jam and cream. Their cheerful moment was interrupted by the prince's entrance. Noticing the scones, he remarked on his fortunate timing, having just finished a meeting. To everyone's surprise, he lifted Lawana into his arms and offered her a piece of scone. He briefly mentioned a trivial argument during the meeting about whether jam or cream should be spread first on scones, but dismissed it as unimportant. The prince noticed a bandage on Lawana's hand and asked if she was hurt. Lawana remembered she had forgotten to remove the bandage from earlier. What schemes lie behind the maid's shocking claim, and could it signal deeper unrest within the palace? With Tauren stirring fragments of Lawana's forgotten past, and Enrit stepping into her role as the princess's sharp new escort, tensions and mysteries continue to build. As alliances shift and hidden truths emerge, how far will the prince and Selvin go to protect Lawana from the dangers ahead?